Good evening. Welcome to the October 30th Village Board Work Session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty. So we have some announcements this evening before we get the agenda underway. And for anybody who looked at the agenda earlier in the week, we did have a little change. We had to postpone the visit from the representative from the New York Civil Liberties Union. Just she wasn't feeling well, so we're going to hopefully reschedule it for our next work session. Rika, you had something to share with us?
Yes, Friday night, Ossining was very nicely honored and represented, I believe, by the Westchester Hispanic Law Enforcement Association had their gala slash dinner. It was wonderful. It was packed. Manny went, I went, I think Karen Diatori was there, and Nancy Koba, who's one of our town judges, was there. And the chief was being honored by the association. He was the honoree of the year. There were 4 recipients, but he's an honoree. I really enjoy going to dinners like this. I learned a lot when I was there. What I also learned about Ossining is that our chief had announced with the President of the Association that they will be working together very soon in systematically creating a better way of creating a larger pool of Hispanic officers so that there's a greater pool of talent to draw on for police departments across Westchester County with this association. That got big applause, and it was actually announced by the president of the association, not by our chief. Made me proud, and I just wanted to share that. I don't have more detail than that, but I do want to say that kudos to the association, kudos to Chief Sylvester, and I'm sure that he will enlighten us and tell us more about this program as it moves forward.
Do you have any announcements? Okay, then I have a few. You can get your calendars out. Tomorrow is Halloween. As you may have heard, the weather is not looking great. So what was scheduled to be trunk or treat down in Market Square that the police organize with the community center, with the rec department, is going to be moving indoors. It will be in the community center, and let me see, the chief gave me his description of it. Same hours, 6 to 8 p.m. in the gym. Halloween is a go. Still music, still bounce house, still fun. Businesses and organizations, instead of having trunks, which they would have been parking on Main Street, they will set up tables and set up some kind of a path or a road for the kids to follow to do their trick-or-treating in the gym. So it's always a great way to connect with community members. Last year we had a beautiful night. It was wonderful. This year we'll be indoors, which is a lot more comfortable for anybody who doesn't want to knock on doors in the rain. So there's double reasons to come join the fun down at the gym. Last night, a number of us, Stuart was there, Karen was there, Rika was there, Manny was there, I was there, our deputy corp counsel was there, and there were also a couple of members of the town board who were there, and where there is the Ossining Public Library for the Landlord Tenant Relations Council meeting. And what was really exciting about this meeting, just from an organizational village government perspective, is I think this is, at least in recent memory, the first time I'm aware of a volunteer council, in this case, deciding that they wanted to host an event, an educational outreach, in this case about landlord and tenant relations, particularly focusing on changes in New York State law related to housing and tenants' rights. And there was a lot of discussion about leases and what could be included and what was different. And there was a presentation that was created by members of the council, and representatives from the Landlord Tenant Relations Council were present to be able to answer questions. We were there for, I think, an hour and a half with questions and answers, and sharing a lot of information with both landlords and tenants. And it was I think I wasn't sure how many people would show up. It's a little bit of a
So I wanted to do
It was a much better
more
turnout than I expected. It was
Good
really
crowd.
yeah, it was a good crowd. It was well attended. Aside from all those village people, it was mostly community members. So so that was really really nice to see, and we thank all the
It was
volunteers.
also, yeah, it was also videotaped. So if you have any questions or want to see what happened, just go to our village website. It's there, or YouTube channel is it should be there by now, I believe.
No, they
Um,
said Friday.
you said Friday?
They'll
Okay,
probably go up Friday afternoon,
Friday.
just so
So
nobody
Friday
gets.
TV was
afternoon.
there.
Right.
It
Yes.
sounds like
Nobody
the
gets-
video
oh,
will
yeah.
be up
No,
within
that's
the
good.
coming days. So
Yes.
check back to the village YouTube channel to check that out. And there's lots of information there for you. And we thank very much the volunteer members of the Landlord Tenant Relations Council. Put a lot of work into it, and I was pleased that people showed up and got some good information. Today, also well attended by the village this morning. Karen Dottori, Paul Fraioli, and myself all attended. Let's see, what do they call it in Con Ed? The annual municipal.
Sorry.
Oh, that's exciting.
Nice little background music
I was
happening
looking
here.
for something else. It
Uh,
happened in Barclay the day before yesterday.
oh yeah, that was I can.
Let's look
I was
for
there
that
too.
one.
I can talk about that if you want. So we're getting ready for winter storm season. Con Ed invites all the municipalities each year for an information exchange. This was, I thought, particularly valuable. Con Ed, I don't know if they've always done this, but I've been attending we've gone to a few now in the last couple years because when we had the back-to-back storms of Quinn and Riley, and Con Ed, didn't perform to the level we might have hoped, from everything from communication to actual response. And they really seem to have stepped up their game. I was reassured by much of what we heard today, and they've been gradually, consistently improving since then. Always well intentioned, but I think actually really fulfilling a lot of their intentions in a better way, and we'll find out because the temperature, the forecast for this winter, based on their meteorological studies, is to be normal to below normal temperature, so it's going to be cold, and normal to above normal precipitation. So if it's cold and there's precipitation, make sure you have your shovel ready, and it'll be a long cold winter. So with that in mind, the Con Ed has been preparing for that. They talked about they have a 3-year cycle for trimming trees throughout the region that they cover, which is Westchester, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island. That's 1,400 miles of roads, and most of the tree work that they do in all of those counties is in Westchester because we're so heavily treed. And that's why you sometimes get those funny looking trees. They talked about the different number of feet in each direction that a tree needs to be from a power line. And if you've seen them this year, then you'll see them, 3 years later, they'll be coming back and doing some more trimming around that tree. And they also talked a lot about danger trees. If there's a danger tree, and that means a tree that is likely to take down power lines, they'll just remove the whole tree, and that should be brought to their attention. They've done 906 danger tree removals in Westchester since during part of this program. And I don't know if that was 1 year or just since Riley and Quinn. That seems like a lot of trees, but that's one of the ways to try and prevent long-term outages. Some of the others is they've done hundreds of breakaway services, which is if a tree falls on a power line, it snaps at a shorter distance than it might have otherwise before they put these in. So that means only half of a neighborhood has to lose power, which is a big deal in our neighborhoods where there's a lot of people on one given block. And obviously, communication has gotten better, although everybody has smart meters now, which does basically tell when the power is out, but they're still working on integrating the smart meter information with the outage map. So if you ever lose power, please call or notify Con Ed right away. If you could do it on a smartphone, you can call. That still is very important, even though that seems kind of old-fashioned. It really does make a difference. The one other thing that I will always give them credit for that they do very well, and they're continuing with their training, is their Municipal Liaison program. When there is a major storm, Ossining and the village and town do share this resource. We call Con Ed if we think that we're going to want a Con Ed Municipal Liaison, and then they come and they sit in the police station, and we feed them nice sandwiches and coffee, and they get us lots of information, and they communicate with Con Ed about what's going on in Ossining, and You may, if you're the person who didn't have power in Indian Village after the last storm for well over a week, then it may not feel like the communication was adequate enough, but it really did make a difference for a lot of people in our community, and we will continue with that, and we're grateful that they recognize the importance of that training. So it was, I think, a morning well spent, and having FaceTime and connecting with all of those people is really valuable. And I don't know if you've been to those before. This is certainly your first time as a village manager getting ready for a big winter
It's my
storm
first time.
season. So
Yes.
good. I'm glad you were there, and it was we got to meet all the important people in those positions. And then I'll just pick up on what Trustee Quesada was mentioning. Yesterday, I joined with the mayor of Briarcliff and the town supervisor and our county legislator and our senator and a bunch of first responders on the side of 9A in Briarcliff. It's part of an ongoing effort to get the attention of the DOT to do roadway improvements. Every community has state roads crisscrossing through our villages and towns. We do not have the authority or the funding to be able to do the necessary repairs and upgrades ourselves, but we do have the responsibility to do the outreach and the communication with the DOT to let them know what we're experiencing. If things are unsafe, it's our community members who are put at risk. If roadways are deteriorating, it's our vehicles that are paying the price for that. Or if there's a lot of bottlenecks, then it's our communities that are not being welcoming for people to be able to live, work, and play in. So that's what we were doing, was getting the attention of the DOT. There was particularly for 9A, but we are continuing to work on our efforts to re-engage the DOT for the state roads here in the village of Ossining, Route 9, Route 133, and Route 134. And it is a multi-year effort, and I'm pleased that Karen's entrance into village government has been helpful in helping us figure out a really constructive way to hopefully move forward with that. And when we have something exciting to report, I know that we will, because that's an important issue for so many of us. Trustee Herrera, you had something to add or ask?
Yes, I'm actually, thank you for being there. I spoke to Mayor Vesio and some of the trustees, and, you kind of, how you ended your remarks is actually right on point, which is I would like to know what our next steps are regarding our advocacy for the state roads in our community and what we're doing. I know that there's a lot of internal work going on and has been going on, but I also want to know in writing as an action plan from this board, and it is an ask to Assemblywoman Galoff and Senator Carlucci as to what their action plan is in place for this legislative session to address the concerns that we have formally brought to their attention. A lot of communities choose how they kind of want to hold the state accountable and their officials. So that's why Mayor Vesio chose to do a press conference and kind of a rally. And I think it's time for us to really have a conversation as to how we're going to be creative to share our story and to really expedite a response as to what they plan to do or how they plan to address us, because it's been a couple of years now, and I know that you've been trying, we've been trying, our past managers, our current managers trying, but I think we need a little bit more than we're working on it. That's all. Thank you.
Anybody else have any announcements? All right. Oh, that's a good reminder. Yeah, we're in the middle of our election week. It's very exciting. For the first time ever, New York State has early voting. I voted on Saturday. I don't know if anybody else in the room has voted yet. If you're an Ossining resident, go ahead and vote at the community center. I see we actually have one of our election workers is with us today, and I was ballot number 43 on Saturday afternoon. So I understand that there are thousands who have voted across Westchester already. If you're one of them, good job. If you're waiting till the traditional election day, which is Tuesday, November 5th, you'll be in your regular polling place. But if you want to vote early, there are different hours every day of the week. I think tomorrow is the later hours, so you could actually go to the community center. In fact, while the trick-or-treat thing, the parking lot's going to be lovely tomorrow evening. So I would actually vote before 6 o'clock when the Halloween thing starts, because there's limited parking on a good day. But you can vote until 8 o'clock on Wednesday, and then it's a little earlier starts earlier on Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday is 12 to 5. You can go to the Westchester Board of Elections website for all kinds of information about early voting and find out your regular polling place if you don't know. Voting on election day is 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Okay, now I think we're really done. Are we good with announcements? There's a lot going on. All right, Karen, why don't you help guide us on this next item?
Yes, so I'd like to invite Michael Monquidi and Joe from Simprosity and Joe Agustinelli up, and also Craig Cooper to talk about Simprosity, which is an online platform so that we will be able to do online building and planning permits.
Welcome.
Who's speaking?
You can turn it on, though. I don't mind having the light in my face right now.
So, good evening, Mayor and members of the board. Just to give you a little kind of background on how we got to this point. Over the last 6 months, we've been searching to upgrade our current building department software program, focusing on a program that would allow the public to submit all types of applications online, such as homeowners, contractors, architects, engineers could submit building permit applications or submit a zoning variance application, planning board application, electrical permit, or plumbing permit from a computer from their home or office without the need of actually physically coming to the building department to submit. They can submit all the necessary documents, can be submitted electronically rather than on paper documents. The idea was to also have realtors and title search companies submit requests for information on properties online from their office or home. After searching for some time for this type of software for companies that can provide this service, and also speaking to other building department employees from municipalities that currently provide this type of service to their communities, and meeting with representatives from a number of software companies that provide an online submittal service, the company that we felt that stood out as best to provide the service was Simprosity. After a number of meetings with our sales representative, it became clear that they were able to provide an online service to us and the community, and to continue to store and maintain our building and planning department records with their software package at a very reasonable price. So today we have our representative and one of the developers of the program, Mike Mankiti. Hope I didn't say your name wrong, but Mike Mankiti.
We both
It's a little tough the last name, but he's here to present a little presentation of what the program is and how it somewhat works for the board to see. And our hope is that if it's something that we can get to use for the community, that it would actually be a big improvement on the way the convenience of submitting applications online, cut down a lot of time, and make it a lot more friendly and functional for the community. So, Mike, I'm going to turn over to you to introduce yourself and give them a little presentation.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say thank you to the mayor and the board for inviting us to make this presentation to you to talk about this tool. So this is an efficiency tool, right? So in our view, it's how can you do more with less, right? And under that we mean like how do you maximize your outputs, right? In terms of like how do you provide more services with less time or with less capital, right? But maintaining the same level of quality or better quality, and in this case, providing better customer service, right? So as Joe mentioned, today most municipalities, when it comes to permitting, residents or contractors have to come to the building department. They have to fill out some forms. There's back and forth, lots of back and forth, right? That process is manual. So with this tool, what it does is it allows the your constituents and your property owners to go through the permitting process with less of that back and forth. We one of the difference between what we do or how we provide our services and others are, we really are a partner. So we stay involved with our clients, working with them, not just install a package and then just say collect maintenance and move along. Our services, we have clients that have as little as 6,000 populations to 300,000 populations, right? So we work with municipalities or communities that scan the gamuts in terms of the size, right? So we are able to provide that service to you guys. Both now, this is with both the town and the village, right? So the three areas that we focus on is reducing foot traffic, right? So the building department will definitely experience a huge drop in foot traffic, and that's because applicants, residents, contractors will be able to file these permits online. There will be instant and immediate back and forth that are system generated. So when a permit is reviewed, for example, email is going to go out to the applicants, email and text messages to keep them in the loop so that they know where in the process their permit is without having to make the calls. We also, so with paper checks, today, when you take a paper check, that process alone is, not thinking about it, it's very onerous, because what happens is the building department takes that check, they have to make a record of it, keep a batch for the week, take all of the paper, send it to the finance department, they then have to process the check and then send it to the bank. So there's a lot of time just in that. With this process, folks are going to pay the permit fee online. Immediately, within a couple of days, the funds are going to be available in the city's bank account, right? So filing cabinets, right? So today, with tremendous amount of papers that you're collecting, you're keeping filing cabinets, right? So year after year, you're having more boxes of paper in the offices. So if you just go in any one of your offices, like the building department, you'll see they have many filing cabinets, and at some point, you just won't be able to keep adding file cabinets.
We may be at that point.
So why now? Like, why do this now? All right. So, a lot of reasons, but three main ones. More and more, the expectations from your constituents, right? Your constituents out there, they see that they can order something from Amazon. They get it like same day delivery or next day delivery, right? There's so customers expect the same thing, right, from municipalities for somebody that's getting permits. Like, well, can the process be easier? And I think so the expectation is out there from the constituents that these processes or government services should be easy as services that they get from private sectors. Also, limited resources. Less money, less people, right? Most municipalities don't have as much money as they used to have, right? And they have less people. So we have to find ways to bridge the gap so that the less resources and less people can do the same amount of work, right, without degradation in the service. And then paper, right? At some point you just have to get away from the paper because it just can't sustain that. So the services that we're focusing on will be permits, property records. So permits you all show familiar with, right? Someone needs a permit, they get an architect have to file the design. There's back and forth between the building department, there's a review, right? So that permitting process, we put that online so that the process is faster. Also, you have property records where realtors and title search companies are looking for property records from the building department or from whatever department that have them. And today they may file like a FOIA request, which bogs down the departments. So now if we have electronic records, it's easy to give information, and you have less of that from the realtors that are basically just looking for information. Then you have planning board applications that we'll also make available so that those can be filed online as well. And on the staff side, a lot of these permits or processes involve collaboration from various departments. And today, how that happens is manually. So they actually take folders and just move it manually to the various departments or the people that have to review them. In this case, what happens is that there is collaboration real time within the system, so that a customer could call and anybody in the department can say, oh yes, the engineering department has reviewed this application, this is what they said, right? As opposed to, okay, we have to transfer you because we don't handle that part of that aspect of it. So just, looking at what is going on today and what the impact will be, data entry, right? Another place where a significant amount of time is spent, right? Because today, when the applicant fills out the application on paper, someone in the office have to enter that into the system, right? So that takes time, and the handwriting sometimes is not legible. So there, there's room for error, right? There's back and forth with that. The check processing, which I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of time spent on that could be eliminated by automating that. And then record retention. So if the records are digital, then researching and finding information is much faster and easier than what happens today, where you have to go into the file folder to find the records. And if you, for example, say, hey, we want to know about a permit that was issued, say, 6 years ago, right? What's that process like today? So you have to go to, maybe it's off-site storage, and you have to go digging and looking for that, as opposed to now, you'll have that, with a few clicks of a mouse. I think that's what we got. So that's what it is. It's really as a tool that will help the city, the village, and the town, as well as your constituents, right, to get through the process much faster than what they're doing today, with better communications between both sides. Yes.
So basically, right now, the way it is if somebody's submitting a building permit application, whether it be the contractor, the homeowner, an architect, they have to physically come to the office, fill out an application by hand, bring in insurances, bring in large size plans, drop it off, pay the fee through either a check or credit card or cash. And then somebody in the office has to upload all that information. Whereas in this case, a person from their own computer at home or in an office can easily upload those plans electronically, fill out the application online, load up all the documents for insurances. Once that stuff is sent to us and everything's complete, for all intents and purposes, the application is already in the system. So you save the time of somebody physically manually doing this. And then there's tracking of the permit. Like they'll get a response back and say your permit is complete. It's in a review process. If there's a revision that goes out, we can actually quickly get those revisions to a design professional so they can make their corrections to speed the process of getting the permit issued. And during this entire process, the homeowner, the design professional, the contractor can follow online because they are given the right to check on that application, and they can see the process. If it's pending because they need an engineering review, or it's pending because we sent you to the zoning board, they could see what day they're put on the agenda for the zoning board, so they can follow the whole process. So it saves a lot of time of people calling all the time by saying, I need to speak to someone to tell me what's going on with my application. They can actually follow the whole process all the way through. Same thing with the planning department. They can submit all their applications for the zoning board, the planning board, historic preservation commission, right online. And those documents, the planning department secretary can actually send those documents that are already in the system electronically to all the board members without having to actually physically make packages and mailing them to board members or delivering it to them, which is a lot of paperwork. This way they would get it right on their computer and they can see it and review it before the meeting. So there's a lot of points to doing this. One is convenience because, as we had spoken, sometimes you have contractors that are busy doing other jobs, and rather than them coming up to the building department to submit an application, they'll send a homeowner who really doesn't know the process. They're depending on the professionals to do so, but understanding that they can actually go online and do this, the anticipation is that the professionals that handle this, not having to physically come to the building department, will do the process themselves because they're more, they have more knowledge on how to do this. An architect will do it from their office rather than knowing that I have to have someone deliver all these packages in. So we feel that, that in alone would actually help the process with a lot of homeowners because they'll have the people who they're paying professionally to do this because they have more convenience to do it within their office.
I'm sure there's lots of questions from the board members. Karen, did you want to add anything to that before the trustees and I ask questions?
We've been reviewing this for quite some time, and well, since I've been here, and I think it really initiated through the building department before then. We're working with the town, so the town is doing this in parallel. They're also looking to, establish a working relationship with some prosody. So it would really be a benefit to all town and village residents. We think it would be an enormous time saver, convenience, and I think it makes a lot of sense for the way people do business today. And having worked with the building department in a former life and submitting permits, I know that this will be for people who do a lot of construction and are submitting building permits and planning permits. This is a really tremendous opportunity.
Okay, who wants to be first?
Thank you. Great presentation. I see that this is we've had a lot of conversations in the past about permits and electronic processes. And I see this as, advancing the village forward. On one of the slides on the back end, there was a portion about code enforcement. So my question to you is there, on the front end, is there a way for village residents, if there are issues with code enforcement, to be able to submit complaints on via website or via app?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So code enforcement is a part of it, right? So you can allow residents to submit complaints,
Okay.
and the department will receive them and they will act on it. So yes, code enforcement is a part of it.
So do you also have a mobile app?
We currently don't have a native app,
Okay.
but this system works on a mobile device.
Okay.
So a lot of folks will use it on a mobile because it's mobile friendly.
Okay.
Right? That yes, it works on a mobile.
Okay.
And some communities will say what type of complaints can be submitted electronically. So they try to manage that. But it's up to you, right? What and how much complaints you want to receive electronically.
And the cost.
So basically, obviously they have an initial fees that they pay. We pay it's I think $3,700 a year for the first 3 years. That's the setup fee to transfer all the documents that we have on our current program into their program, plus the training cost to train all the employees on this system. After that, the way they're paid is basically they get a fee for every transaction. But what we're doing is at the budget meeting is we have fees that we are going to be proposing to the board that would actually cover the cost of whatever their percentage is. It's not a lot. It's a small amount But rather than confusing the public into I pay one fee and another fee and another fee, they would just be charged the one permit fee, and they at the transaction would put in their I believe they spoke with the finance department where we would collect the fees, and then they would send a bill to the finance department to collect whatever their percentage is. Which is why, as Mike had said, that they have an ongoing investment with the village. It's not we set you up and then walk away. If the program works well and everybody's using it and working on it, there's a benefit for them because they get a fee for every transaction. So they stay maintained with the program all the time because it's a benefit to them that it succeeds.
And question for you, Karen. You said that the town and the village is doing this side by side. Is this like an IMA agreement, or is this
No.
just two separate
Two
contracts?
completely separate contracts.
Would it make a difference if only one municipality decided to go forward and another didn't, or is there an economy of scale?
Um, I guess, Mike, if you can answer. I think
Well,
that-
so we did we did look at it from that standpoint, right? Where we were going to do both the town and the village, and we did do something with the pricing to reflect that. So yes, the savings have been given because of that economy system. Because the village and the town are currently using the same system that we're migrating from, right? So the migration effort, we do it once and we're able to share it. Same. So the training, we'll do the training individually. So the long shot is yes, there are savings because both the town and the village are doing it.
And has Karen, or actually you might know, has the town had a public discussion about this yet?
Not yet.
Not yet, but they've indicated to us that that is a go on their side. Oh.
Okay.
Well, they've indicated that they're
I
going
imagine
to.
the council members that haven't had a discussion will be interested to know that.
But
They're
going
happy you
through it.
just said that.
Going through it. The goal is to go ahead and bring it
That
to
is-
a
that
public
is the
hearing.
intention.
Let's,
Okay.
let's just clarify.
I think we all have a shared interest in being more accessible to the community, so there's a lot of good reasons to want to pursue it. Others with questions? Comments? Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
ahead.
I thought
No,
you were
go-
gonna go.
no.
I thought we were going this way. So go ahead.
Go ahead, I'll go.
I just so a lot of these platforms, updates, etc. How are they contracted for when you're upgrading or changing? Is that all just a per transaction? So it's all included in there?
Yes. Yes. We we're constantly doing improvements and updates, and we're not coming back with new fees or invoices for that, right? The price that he just mentioned, the fee, that's it. We're not charging you for updates. We never charge you for updates.
Okay. And is there a confidentiality issue? Is there anything in any of these forms that are not public information? That's actually not for you. It's more for
No.
Joe.
Actually, we had these discussions with Mike, and we can modify the program to what we choose in the program that is public information and what is not. So, if somebody submits an application, whoever is listed on that application could obviously follow the details of that particular application, meaning the homeowner,
Right.
contractor. But all that information is not for everybody in the public because they don't have to follow somebody's permit. But information will be public, like the way we do with Municipal Connect right now, if somebody wants information on permits, C of Os and so forth, like a realtor would want it, they can get that information on there, but it would be basically how we set it up. You would know the permit number, you'd get a brief description of what the permit is and that it's closed or open or C of O. But the details of all the information about that permit would be something they would have to do, say, in a FOIL request, and then which they could also do on the service and online. And then we can go forward to give them more documentation. So we can set up the parameters of what the public can see and what they can't, depending on what we feel is legally correct and what is not.
Okay. What's the timeline look like from a green light?
I think we're kind of shooting for this to be up somewhere probably in March. to get all the documents transferred,
Right.
to basically get everybody trained properly on the system. It's going to be, it's fairly quick, but it's, a couple of months to be practical to get everything running.
And people will have a choice of still walking in and doing these transactions?
They could, but we talked about putting a computer at a location, a station in the department, and give them the opportunity, if somebody doesn't have a computer today at home, that they can use that and like a kiosk, so they can submit it. But the intent is to get away from taking paper documents
Right.
altogether.
So you could have somebody help somebody get
Yes.
something done,
Right.
but you don't really want to take things.
Right.
In
In a case, especially for like homeowners, it's and even contractors and so forth, it'll be a little bit of a transition until they get used to it. But obviously, not every person in our community, a homeowner, is very savvy on a computer, but we'd be able to help them in the office with that. But again, the idea is not to have the property owner having to do this all the time, having this convenience. We would hope that they would have their architect or their
Right.
contractor do this for them.
Right. And those people should know how to do this correctly, and they should do it.
Because
And
they're
they're doing it
more
often.
Sure.
Did you say on the mobile that they're responsive themes, or it's or iPhone, or I use an iPhone, but Android friendly? The screens on the iPhone.
Yes. So it's mobile friendly, so it adapts to your screen size. But we will have a native app for the permits, right?
Okay.
And for the complaints. So for certain things, the things that are residents facing, we'll at some point create like native apps so that apps could be downloaded.
Okay. That's it for me. And thank you for the presentation. I forgot to start with that.
Thank you as well. You know, 5 years ago, Trustee Casada, Mayor Garrity, and I discussed this, and it's really cool to see it full circle 5 years later in an actual presentation in an actual doable format. And then I'm looking mainly at Trustee Casada just because he put in, a lot of work, especially those 2 years, to try to push it. So I'm just really I'm glad that we could move this forward and not have to do carbon copy and antiquated systems and move out, and move forward. So thank you, because we've been asking for it for a while, and it's great to actually see it move forward. I have a question about the multi-department interface. So if we're doing an inspection and fire's involved and other departments are involved, like, is that part of your training, like how all the departments are going to interface with the software?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you have multiple departments using, so this is on the complaint side, right? This is because I guess your complaints are coming in either in the departments or someone is taking the calls and then routing it.
Well, not just complaints, but I mean, like, let's say someone applies, right, and there's the fire side of the inspection, there's this side of the inspection.
Got it.
The building department works with all of them. Is that part of the training?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the departments are collaborating in the software, right? So that those departments that have to give some review on a permit, they're all doing it in there, as opposed to having it in some silo.
Okay. And when either a village employee, whether elected, appointed, or a member that's on our boards, or Ossining resident does a FOIL, all those forms, when they are redacted with the appropriate information, those are printer friendly. So like it'll just automatically just configure the application or the form so we could print it in one or view it as a PDF. Or I'm trying to visualize it. If the mayor and the board or the planning board or the HPC or me as a resident, is it going to just compile it all like automatically?
So with the four is it's up to you how you want to fulfill it. In most communities, what happens is the FOIA request comes in, they send it off to a department. That department collects the record, whether it's electronic, digital, or paper. They put it together, and then they upload it and say, okay, this is what you sent. As opposed to the system going and grabbing the information and sending it off, right? So I think you want where someone is actually looking and saying, this is what we're going to send, as opposed to a system saying, okay, I'm going to search for all of these and then send it. Does that?
It's okay. No.
I think in a lot of ways. So if somebody wants to submit a FOIL request, they can do it with this system, and they'll send it in. If the request that they have is pertinent to other departments, then that request would be seen interdepartmentally. They can get it, so they can prepare those documents and give that information. So if some of the questions of what the person's searching for is something to come out of the Department of Public Works, they would be able through interdepartment to get that FOIL request and submit whatever documents that are required from them. If some documents are from the building department, that can be also put into the system, and that person would get that total package online sent back to them and say, here's the package of what you're asking for from the various departments, but sent to them maybe in one package.
Okay.
Is that more of
Digitally.
The system wouldn't say, the system wouldn't prepare the package.
Right. Yeah.
No,
So
but hold on a second. I think let me clarify that. So I think what Trustee Herrera was trying to find out is if is that when you upload those documents either through manually or through the system itself, is it going to be like a PDF format? Is it going to be a JPEG? Is it going to be a
Yes,
printer
yes.
friendly? So I think that's what.
yeah.
Yes.
I know it's very simple, but because we've
Yes.
gotten attachments from online services, and we
Correct.
try printing or viewing them, and it's a whole mess.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that. The other thing is there a way to have these forms translated into other languages?
we
Yes.
talked about that also.
So we've talked about that a bit. So online you see that there are, you go to a website and they have on the browser where you could just change the language, right? We do have that. However, that does not get the context of questions with permitting. So at some point we do need to, or we will do like a language versions that does in fact look at the context, right? So we have that on the website where you could change the language, but that doesn't do it because of this type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean on the actual forms, especially because of the type of forms that they are, the context matters absolutely. 100%.
Right.
Google Translate would definitely not be appropriate for.
No.
for,
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, would that be included in your proposal and quote once we get to that stage?
So when we get to a place where we've built that, we won't charge extra for that. So we will get there naturally, right? And we won't charge. We don't come back and say, hey, we have a Spanish version, for example, and now you have to pay for that.
Oh no! I just wanted to make sure or know that it's not that it's something that you can do now. So if we started it, that by March,
It won't be in this. It won't be in March. It won't be in your first version. No. Yeah. Unless as a group you said, hey, put the Google translator in there for now, or not even Google. They're getting better. The tools, right? Not Google. There are other tools that can do the translation and grab some context. It's getting better, but it's not 100% there.
so you as a consultant or as a service provider, you cannot or you don't provide a service yet to transcribe forms.
No.
But if we did, you would just.
Yes, if you
I'm
did.
trying to explore options. That's all.
Yeah. So let's say you said we will take all the questions and we will translate them, and then we want to give you that translation. We'll put it there. We'll make that available.
And that's something we can definitely do, at least the Spanish translation.
Okay.
So if we have the documents like filling out a building permit
Yeah.
application or so forth, we
The
can
basic ones. Yeah.
use those documents in the Spanish language, and then you can put that up as an option for them to use that as the submittal.
Yeah, we do have like in your show, they have a business registration that we did both Spanish and English, right? So they're completely separate. It's the full thing like you're talking about here, right? Where they did actually fully translate it, So I mean, it's possible. Yeah.
Cool. Um, who's your oldest client as a municipality right now?
New Rochelle.
It is New Rochelle. Okay. And for the separate um, native app that would potentially enable residents to report stuff like within code enforcement, just something to, if you could just explore, add it to our proposal. I might as well just ask for it now and see how it goes. What I've seen in other cities, and I'll try to find it, is where once the municipality made a determination as to what they're going to allow to be submitted through mobile device, some of the stuff was just anonymous. They took a picture from their phone
Yeah.
and they sent it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that either went to either the police or the applicable department. I don't know if that's too much
Yeah.
or too advanced, but
No. So there are platforms out there that just do that. For example, so See Click Fix is one that comes to my mind. So if you had one of those, or let's say you brought in that service, we will integrate it.
You will?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And that might be.
Right. So immediately,
Yeah, that's the one that we saw.
that's the one you saw. Yeah. So See Click Fix is one where they have a platform that residents can download the app and send complaints. So we then take those complaints and integrate it so that the departments can respond to it. So we do that with in the city of Newark. So the city of Newark has a mobile app, a native, that we take the complaints in and then distribute it.
For you. So there was a multi-dwelling icon.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is?
So some municipalities have what they call a multi-dwelling registration. I don't know if it's here, but multi-dwelling.
Yes, say it louder.
So multiple dwelling registration,
Man.
right, where owners of multiple dwellings that do not live there
Mhm.
have to register them, and they will provide like information for getting access to it, right? So is there a property manager?
Mhm.
Who's that property manager? And if the fire department was to come out or the city was to come out, they need to be able to know who to contact, right? And yeah, and then they will ask for stuff like who's the power provider,
Mhm.
right? Is it Con Edison, that kind of stuff. So for safety purposes.
And what clients do you have that use that out of your list?
So New Rochelle has it.
Mhm.
I believe Irvington has it.
Mm.
Almost all the municipalities in New Jersey have
Okay.
multiple dwelling and or landlord registration. So right.
Thank you.
All right, we're coming up to hour one here. Go ahead.
All right, so I'll be quick. All right, so thank you. Thank you for Trustee Herrera remembering that we started this sort of process 5 years ago. So it's kind of cool to see this. Definitely, I want to thank Village Manager and Joe Gastinellis for kind of pushing this along this year and try to accomplish something for next year with our first quarter. I really don't have that many questions because I've been sort of part of the process for the past few months. Internal came here for one of the presentations, kind of answer a lot of the questions that I had and a lot of concerns. There's a couple of things obviously that I want to ask, I guess, in the public part is right now we have is it Municity right now that someone can go in and they can look at because you have to have a user to use this application. You have to create an account. Sure. Right now, Municity, you don't need an account to look at anyone's information that is that is public information within that property. So my question is, if someone wants to look a property right now, they don't need to FOIL to look at some basic information. But with the system itself, you need to register.
Yeah.
Correct?
So yes. So the registration, right, is simply so that at the very least, you know who's looking at records in the village, right? So at the very least, because all the registration is, hey, you give us an email address, we confirm the email address, and then you're good to go, You could look at data, right? Now you could go where you say, okay, we don't even want them to create an account, but create an account is just like a little thing where it's like, okay, we at least want to have an email address.
That's a discussion that I think we can have because a lot of people, a lot of it gets a little bit of privacy. They just want to stay, they don't
Anonymous.
want to create any concept or anything like that. So that's one question that I had. So the other one as a contractor or an architect or even as a developer, I guess. When you create an account, but you do multiple jobs within the same municipality, as a homeowner, if the architect is or the contractor is doing applications, the homeowner won't have access to that to the application itself. It will be the applicant who has the access. Or is it a way for the homeowner to have some sort of access to see the process of that application?
I
itself?
believe anybody who is put as an individual on that application, because you're gonna have a section that fills out the homeowner. So the homeowner who's on that application, the contractor who maybe that's the applicant, and the design professional, all three of those people can follow that project.
Great.
So and that's something that we discuss here. We spend some time on that. So those other people that are not the applicant will have some sort of limited access, right? So you as the applicant, you will have, you have complete access. The other folks have some access, but not as complete as the applicant, because like you said, as the applicant, as an architect, you may have other projects that are in your profile that is not meant to be shared, right, with anybody else.
Because I wouldn't want, if the architect or the developer are working in 3 different projects, because we have that happening right now. Sure, I wouldn't want the homeowner from this project to see what's going on with this project because it's one user.
Correct. No. So everybody have their own username. Now, the other thing to be mindful about with the sharing of the project is, for example, property owner hires a contractor. Something goes wrong. I don't want him anymore to be the contractor. Right? How does that work? Is the permit issued to the contractor, or is the permit issued to the property owner? Can the contractor say, "Hey, the permit is mine," because that's an internal, that's like a discussion thing, right? But it's something to be mindful of, that who are you issuing the permit
The permit
to?
is always issued to the property owner.
Okay, so then the property owner can say, "Hey, I don't want this contractor anymore." In which case, we then need to say, "Okay, that contractor is not going to have access anymore." So, but it gets right, because it's like, okay, did the contractor apply for the permit? Are we going
It's
to?
more like technical stuff, which I don't mind going into it, but I know there's other questions.
Yeah, we're getting a
Part-
little in the weeds for
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
our purpose here is.
all this stuff, and we had discussions about the online and the PDFs submissions and everything else. So part of this, and I guess I'm gonna Craig, you're gonna help me with this one. So all this stuff is gonna be in the cloud. How we back in all these documents if something happens?
This is web driven, and it's handled by Amazon Web Services, which is a gigantic system that backs up constantly to more than one server. In other words, our data is not stored on one server. So if one server gets hacked, we're done. It's stored all over the world. So there's no question about backups or anything like that at all. We're good to go.
This particular software or the village in totality? This particular software.
Both.
Oh, both.
Both.
Okay.
But the description of that system is this particular software. that they have.
Okay.
So there's no additional servers that we
No,
have to buy.
this integrates seamlessly with what we have now. Our bandwidth with the internet is more than big enough to handle what we have. There's no need to purchase any other equipment at all.
Do we have to, because I'm pleased with this software. I've seen the capabilities that they can do. I've done stuff in in New Rochelle, where we use the system. And I see what other municipalities have. I think the online service itself is something that we should have done years back, but that's different. Anyway. For the code enforcement officers that we have, and even for you, Joe, do we have the capability right now to have either through a tablet, a laptop, anything that when you go out and actually start using this tool, how does that work? Do we have all that stuff in place right now?
It's all in place right now. We have iPads that the code people are using.
Okay. Okay. And with the app, at some point when
So
it comes in,
yeah.
it will be also a tool that they could use as well. Sure.
So most of the municipalities for code enforcement, they're all tablets, and there's no paper for almost everybody that's using our code enforcement.
Just go out with them one day, because I'm feeling
Good.
like
Okay.
Good.
So we have hit the 1 hour mark, so I'm going to go through my questions as quickly as possible, but I do have a few things. Some were checked off by my colleagues, but I do appreciate that we want to have the applications done online, and we want payments to be online, but are we refusing to now accept paper checks if we put this in place? That's not really a Mike question. That's more of a staff question.
I mean, the idea would be if we do have some architects that still do plans by hand. So they're not digital. So the idea of having a kiosk there is maybe whoever doesn't do it that way, they could come in and we can scan it and put it in the system. But the ultimate idea is to try to eliminate the number of papers altogether.
So let's just say in that scenario, because it sounds like there's a fee per application that's done online that then goes back to this software provider. If somebody comes in and they're not using the software, they're going to pay the same. They're going to say pay the same building permit fee. It's just that chunk of it's not going to the software provider because our staff is doing extra work for them. Correct?
But
I mean,
actually what we're
sounds like a
what we're
budget
going to be
nightmare, but
proposing in
really
the
nightmare.
budget is to have the fees for an electrical permit, a plumbing permit, a building permit that is going to have that fee, which would cover the cost of using
Right.
Sopracity.
So it'll be baked in.
it's
So
baked into the
the
permit.
point is the fee is the fee is the fee.
right.
So it really, if somebody, if you use or not, the fee is the fee.
Right, that's fine. And whether it's the software company that's getting that portion of it, or it's because the staff in your department now has to go scan a bunch of stuff that's using your staff time, they're going to pay the same amount. But the question is, do we have the capacity internally to only pay this nice gentleman for the things that are done online, and we keep that portion of it because our staff's the one who did the work on some
If it doesn't
applications?
go through the system, if it doesn't go through the system, then it won't go through.
Okay. Okay.
You know, it won't go
yeah,
through.
it's the
some
same
process.
fee
Isn't
to
the point to make it go through the system though?
As
It-
much as
it
but what
is,
he's saying
but
is some
if-
architects do paper things.
If
so it's-
somebody, for whatever reason, doesn't like, eventually the idea is to incentivize people to like everything now is to
Yeah.
incentivize people to do it online. But if for some reason somebody was, we're not going to say you can't submit a
Right.
permit. So I think as it evolves, people get more and more comfortable. You have less and less of those circumstances.
Is it only possible to, do you have to then, when you do your application, does it have to be paid in order for the process to be completed? Or could you do all the work online and then say, but I want to do a paper check, and then come in and pay by paper check?
I mean, we can set it up that way, but I mean, the idea would be is if you're going to do all of this at home, then you're going to come in to just drop off a check is kind of counterproductive to it. The idea is to be able to pay that way.
You need to have payment at the time of your submittal. So I don't know that, like, for a variety of reasons, that would be feasible.
You mentioned the web portal for people to be able to access information, which we do have right now. There's no fee for the user for that. Okay. I like the idea of the collaborative platform so that information can be shared, because obviously you do have to interface with other departments, and if that really is going to be functional, then that's great. And sometimes these things sound better in theory than they are in application, but if that really works out, that sounds great. I would love it if when a consumer resident calls up and asks about their project and they ask one of the relevant departments, if that person doesn't have to say call so-and-so. That was a scenario that we hear about a lot. So if we can cut down on bopping people from one phone call to another, that's
Right, and if
Terrific.
everybody is putting their information in from department to department, any staff can see that and give that
Yeah.
information.
That sounds great. Now, uh, the hard copies that we currently make every applicant print up large sizes for every member of the planning board and for the files. Are you telling me that that people don't have to do that anymore and that's not in our code and people are accepting that? Our planning board members are cool with that?
As a matter of fact, when you go to these meetings, the digital copies that are sent to the board get put up on the board for presentation. So
So we have eliminated that whole.
We have to revise our code.
All right.
We do have numbers in our code as to the number of plans that have to be submitted.
All right. So
And that will be part of the
I vote on that's.
Yeah, we can vote on that. We can vote on that in 3 minutes.
If I may, just
We
one
might have a
thing.
unanimous vote.
No, it may be that, for example, Kellett Sessions may want a full copy. So it may be necessary to have one full copy
So
of
we-
the building department.
I was joking. We should
but-
talk to all of the
But I
parties
should
involved.
point out that our code does in fact have a specific number in there.
Okay. Are we still holding people to that? Or is this another example of the code not keeping up with reality?
I would suggest that we probably
Okay.
change the
that answered
code
my
to
question.
make it.
Okay, good. So I haven't seen a written proposal with any of this stuff. I am sure that there is one internally. If it was sent, then I'm sorry I didn't see the email. It's not linked on the agenda. And if I was very happy to hear that if we provide the translation for the building permit, if we provide that in Spanish, which half of our community is Spanish speaking, so it's pretty important, and that's a lot of people who make use of our building department. So if we provide all of that name, nombre, date, fecha, you can just put all of that in so that when it goes live, it goes live. And if there's going to be an expense for that, I want it to be in the contract. And if there's not an expense for that, I want that to be in the contract. And if there's a date certain for that, I want it to be in the contract.
We can provide the translation if you can.
That
put
would
it on as
be, the
part of program,
translation
we can do that.
part would be done on our side.
Right. But if we can we can make sure that it says it, but then we don't actually upload it and create it. And
Oh,
I
okay,
want
see
to
what
make
you're
sure
saying.
that the software company is committing to that.
Yeah. So if you provide the translations, we will do it. It wouldn't be in this first release, right? But we will do it,
And,
and
then
we'll put it in there.
and can we get New Rochelle to pay us for doing the work? Or I'm assuming you're going to give
So
it to
why would
everybody,
I'm
right?
just I don't mean to be difficult, but I don't know why it wouldn't be in the first
In the
release.
first, because so right now we're gonna set up. We're gonna try to set up like what you have now, right? So we have to work through that process and whatever the changes are. So to try to do both at the same time is probably adding a whole lot.
But right now we don't have any online forms. I'm just talking about the application where we're like
We are.
It's
Descriptions and everything
Well,
else.
I'm not worried about that. I'm talking about the applications going forward. Things that permit applications that don't exist yet. Like it would by next week we could, if we had the form in English, a day later we could have the form in Spanish. So
yeah. So there are a couple of things with that. So for example, how are the two groups going to get to the system? So right now in the system you have a page, let's say, to go to the village website. Is the village website in English and Spanish?
all you do is you tap a little thing and it says it's got a little flag and it's got an American flag for English and it's got a Spanish flag for Spanish. It's like the technology exists for the text in a website. I mean, I get like a free little widget on my own little cheap email. Right, but fillable forms are totally different. They have to be created, like you're saying. We would create the translation and then it would be input with that translation.
Yes.
May I just ask a question? How do you reverse it when it gets to the department? Maybe
Well, that's
ask
the
it-
thing. It doesn't need to be. If you say like all the
How
stuff
is
that,
how is person in the department
finish my
know
sentence.
if it's in English?
because if it says like everything we get from the schools, name/nombre, like it.
So
like,
I
why
was-
can't it just the languages be side by side?
Right. What Mayor is suggesting is if you have it in English, that you would have, say, in parentheses,
This
right
is
there
immediately.
below
It doesn't have to be a
on the
separate
same
form.
application translating for you.
So what Postchester has is literally has a bilingual format.
Right.
You know, it's
That's-
literally you have
that's what I'm trying to say.
English and Spanish.
Oh, right next to each other.
next to each other. So it's pretty much the same. It will be something similar to that effect.
So I wasn't. That's not the approach that we take when we do languages. We do the whole thing. By that, what I mean is, someone have to create a username and a password. All of that is translated. The whole process. If I forget my password, I'm not asking for that in English. If I'm in the Spanish version, so just translating, just putting questions, right? Just focusing on the questions is not the complete. That's not. It's not the full view. Now we could. It's
Okay, so
yes.
I think we're getting a little too into the weeds, and we've been doing this for more than an hour. But I think you're hearing the concern and how much of a priority this is to us.
Yes.
Okay. So my next question, so we can move on, is not for Mike, but for the internal. We have an existing software company that's doing that we're using, but we're not using them for online forms. Obviously, we did explore if that was an option to be able to use. Okay.
Greg, I don't know if you want to like to speak to that.
It's a technology reason.
We're currently using Municipal.
Need to be on the mic so people at home can
We're
hear.
using a program, Municipal, and which is not very user friendly. Okay, it's very difficult to work with. We explored going with them with a new version that would give us an online system. Cost was prohibitive. It was over $30,000 just to get into the software.
Right. I figured you had. It's just that you've been in on these meetings, and this is our first blush, basically. So, okay. So then, what do you need from us for next steps? So, is there a proposal? I assume this has a budgetary impact.
So we're reviewing the contract now. We can accommodate comments that were made tonight, and then we need a resolution for somebody like me to sign the contract and go
It
forward.
would be you. Yeah.
So I just had a question in regards to the review of the contract. How long will that take, Stuart? And would
It's
it be
been
ready?
done.
Okay. So if we pass a resolution, let's say next week or whatever, when can we sign? When can Karen sign a
Well,
contract?
we're not going to be able to sign it next week.
No, I
so
know.
we
I'm
just
just saying.
add
I'm
it.
just saying to the time frame. What will be the time frame to get this whole thing?
Well, there'll be a few comments that I'll go over with the folks who were here tonight, but the contract itself is fairly straightforward. As I said, there are just a few matters to deal with, some language that I think just probably should be included with regard to software and things like that. But I had about 9 or 10 points on just to go over, some of which have been answered tonight. So
Great.
should not be.
So
I think the
we might
language
be
issue
able to
is
have
the
it
issue.
ready for next week.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
And now we are welcoming folks from the EAC.
Yes. We have our Environmental Advisory Council here tonight to present their 2019 report. And I'd like to introduce Jessica Hewlett.
And
Oh, I'm sorry. Jessica here.
I'm Kate Schlott.
Kate. I'm sorry, Kate.
That's okay.
welcome.
Hello. So good evening, Mayor and Village of Ossining Board of Trustees. I'm Kate Schlott, and I'm here on behalf of the Environmental Advisory Council for the Village of Ossining. So I'm here with Jessica Hewlett, and we are going to present our 2019 annual report. So I'll take you through our presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions you might have after. So the EAC is a 7-member council. We currently are at 6 members, and we are looking for an additional full council member along with 2 alternates. We need 4 people to have a quorum when we have our meetings, so we're looking to have people as an alternate rotation in case we don't meet that 4-person quorum if that ever happens. So tonight I'm going to take you through some of what we've been doing in the Environmental Advisory Council. So I'm going to take you through some of our projects that we've been reviewing, and I'm going to focus specifically on the Sing Sing Prison Museum project that's coming up. That was the most recent project actually in front of us, so I'll mention that. I will take you, I will also talk about some of the training that we've been doing. We are required to do training for each person, so I'll let you know some of what we've actually done as individual members. I'll take you through our open space inventory for the village, which we started working on a few months ago. The EAC has been working to develop a native plants protocol so that when developers come in and they're looking to do these big development projects, that they have something that they can refer to let them know these are the proper plants that you can use for your development. This is what's native for the region. So we're in the process of working on that. And then I'll take you through some of the plans that we have as far as getting information out to the general public, getting things out to the residents of Ossining, and some of the future community things that are coming up that we would like to be involved in. So part of what we do is that we have to make recommendations to the Board of Trustees, Planning Board of Zoning, Board of Appeals regarding the consistency with our local waterfront revitalization project. So this applies to everything that is west of Route 9. So anything that is a big development that comes in front of us, we have to review as part of the process. So we've gone through 6 big projects that have been brought to our attention that we've gone through the applications. We've looked at Hudson Step, the Atria expansion, the Sing Sing Prison Museum. We've looked at the Village Pier extension. We've looked at 173 North Highland, which is currently the Brandon's Furniture Store. They want to turn that into a gas station as well as self-storage facility. And we've reviewed the Mariondale Pool House construction along with the patio and walkway that they would like to build. So the Sing Sing Prison Museum. This is the most recent applicant that we've seen that was brought to us about 2 months ago. We provided recommendations. We mentioned things like include solar paneling, additional landscaping, specifically with using native plants, and highlighted certain concerns that we had about surfaces in the parking area. This is an area that was industrial zone for a long time and has potential for a certain number of toxins and contaminants in the actual ground that are still present that we want to make sure don't leach into the river as we're going through this development project. I and the chair of our committee, Erica Bosch, we've had an opportunity to actually take one of the tours of the prison museum, or what is proposed for the museum itself. And I know that other members are planning to take the tour if they have not already done so. This is something that we actually are very excited about. When the presentation was given to us, we could tell that everybody who is involved in the project really has done their homework, and they seem very interested in working with us to make sure that they meet all of the requirements for our land waterfront revitalization program. So given the size and the scope of the project, we really would like to be included more going forward, specifically since we have already given the board that is working on this, the representative who gave us the presentation, we've already given him some recommendations. So going forward, we specifically would like to get updates as the project moves forward, especially in regards to the recommendations and concerns that we've addressed involving the physical environment of the site itself. Something else that came up during one of the tour that I took is looking at climate change and the fact that this is an area that lies right in the flood zone. So this is something that's also part of our discussion when we talk about how we want to see the project move forward, that we take this into consideration. As part of the tour, one of the people who works at the prison actually gave us an idea of what happened during Superstorm Sandy. By the time it hit New York, New Jersey, it technically didn't hit as a hurricane, but it still brought a lot of flooding that devastated much of the New York City region. So he gave us an idea of what it was like at the prison, at the site. So this is something we want to make sure that as we move forward, we're taking seriously as far as sea level rise and issues that can come of it, especially given the toxic nature of the ground and the soil underneath the prison and in that area. We are required to do a minimum of 4 hours of training in relevant courses to the Environmental Advisory Council. A number of us have actually done our training to date. A few of us have done the Hudson River Natural Resource Mapper training. We've done stream compensatory mitigation webinar series, and there was also the planning and zoning in a nutshell. So a few members have done that. I have also attended some conferences where I specifically attended sessions that deal with climate change and how other coastal communities have responded and started to adapt to these issues. So these are things that we're going to bring into the EAC as we move forward and we look at other applications that come in front of us. These are things that we'll take into consideration, considering we are a coastal town and village on a river. We've also been doing an open space inventory. So one of our responsibilities is that we have to maintain an up-to-date inventory or index of all open spaces in public or private ownership within the municipality. So this would include, but not be limited to, natural landmarks, glacial and other geomorphic or physiographic features, streams in their floodplains, which we have a bit of, swamps, marshlands, other wetlands, biotic communities, and so on. So back in May, we actually started going through all of the vacant lots that we have in the village. We've been looking at the maps for the village to get an idea of where our empty lots are, vacant lots, where we have areas that are overgrown with shrubs, trees, anything that we can use to identify as an open space location to be added into the open space inventory. So we are currently in the process of setting the parameters to design a 3-tiered system to differentiate between different types of open space for the community that we're hoping that we can actually use going forward with the town of Ossining, as well as our surrounding communities, and that can be incorporated and still be in line with the comprehensive plan that we have in place for the village. So actually, to complete this project, we've gotten the initial phases up and going. I've identified a few key sites as well. So we actually would need an intern going forward to complete what we need done for this project. So we estimate that it will require another 150 hours of work. This would take care of everything that we need to do to get all of the data and information that we need for the open space inventory. And we are proposing a stipend of $1,500, which would equal out to $10 an hour for whoever we hire to do this. Our estimated project completion date is June 1st. We really would like to make sure whoever we get to do the footwork for this gets out into the village sometime between April and May, after the last of our major snowstorms come through, so that they can actually get access to as much of the village as possible. So the native plant protocol that I had mentioned before, as part of our comprehensive plan for the village, we are trying to include native plantings in our landscape. So at the moment, whenever we have someone come in front of the council and brings us an application, the first thing that we usually tell them is make sure that your plants are native to the region. And not just native, we're specifically looking for non-invasive native plants. So whenever someone comes in front of us with an application, we look over their plant list. The chair person actually, this is part of what she does for a living. So she's very well versed in different plant species, what's native, what's not, what's invasive, what's non-invasive. And we are working on coming up with an actual list that we can give out to the community as well. We don't want this just to be aimed at developers. We would like to get more involved with making sure that we get information about native plants and pollinators. So we really would like to get these non-invasive native pollinating plants out there in our community. I don't know if this works. Let's see. Okay. So we're working with oh, I'll now do it. Okay. Oh, I need to. Can you control? Ah, it's not. This is not like forget it. Don't worry about it. It's not that the website. We can put that up on the village website. Um. So where was I? Okay. Yes. Thank you. So for example, like being careful about which plants that we pick that are native plants. Uh, poison ivy. Poison ivy is a native plant, but I'm pretty sure you don't want poison ivy growing wild out in your backyard. So we would flag that as something that is an invasive native plant species. I had an unfortunate run-in with poison ivy a year and a half ago, and it's not pleasant. Not pleasant at all. It took about 4 weeks for it to actually clear up before the significant scarring. Um, so part of what we want to do as well as in relation to the native plant protocol is get this information. So once we compile this list, get this list up and available on the Village of Ossing's website so that we can promote this to homeowners at the start of spring going forward. If we can get homeowners to start purchasing seed earlier on, get them planted, it would do great. It actually helps. It's a more cost-effective way of dealing with landscaping issues. Really, it's better for your pocket, and it's better for our local environment as well. So we expect local developers as they come in. We expect them to have native plants. If we see a non-native plant, we flag it, we tell them, and we wait for them to respond to that. And we plan to have, the plan for that is to have that finished by the end of the year. Pretty much we just really need to go through the atlas for the plant species and just start compiling a list that we can disseminate to everybody, and that should be a pretty simple thing for us to do going forward. And lastly, we're looking to do more public outreach. This past year, I had the opportunity to help the town of Ossining with their Environmental Advisory Council booth at the Village Fair. So going forward, I would like to make sure that the village itself is also involved in this as well. Make sure that we have a booth, make sure that we can be involved more also with Earth Day festivities. I mean, we are the Environmental Advisory Council, so these are definitely things that this is what we should do. So we are looking at next year's stuff. So we're looking at 2020. We want to make sure we have a booth at our 2020 Village Fair. And I've been in contact. I have to follow up with the town of Ossining's Environmental Advisory Council. So I've reached out to them, and we plan on the village council plans on getting involved with the town council and hopefully get the municipalities around us to be part more of a public outreach and get involved in the local activities as they come up, especially because the kids really respond well to a lot of what we do. And I saw that at the festival this past year. The kids love dealing with nature, the environment, and getting out there and being part of this community and seeing what they have. So to go forward and really do that, we are hoping for $1,000 so that we can make new signage, have giveaways while we're at these events, and take care of whatever other materials we might need to prepare ourselves for the 2020 year and going forward. Yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns you might have.
That was great. Thank you so much, Kate and Jessica. Thank you for being here as well. And I know it's Rika, maybe you want to speak a little bit to your experience with the EAC while they're here.
Sure. Thank you. You guys are great.
Thank you.
Great group. Get together every month, but as I mentioned to somebody earlier, they also communicate via, in a collaborative way during the month between the meetings to get things done. Great projects. Very happy to hear that the village EAC and the town EAC that you guys connected. I know in the beginning I saw Mitzi actually.
Yeah, she responded. I have been slow in the response, but we've gotten things. We at least got communication open, and Mitzi, from when I have spoken to her, she's been very accommodating and very open to collaborating, which is great.
Well, I think the group is great. You guys actually have expertise in it, although most of you work. So, one of the issues with all our volunteer groups is that there are many people on them that work. Some in the city, it's long days. And so the struggle is to get studies completed. The intentions are good, the ideas are there. Computer knowledge is really high in this group. From a technical point of view, all the way around. But at some point, between going to the meetings and reading the material in advance, because developers do come in front of the AC and they have to have a quorum. You should know we are interviewing people. We've got a lot of us, so that's happening. The issue is one of physical time, which is, so I'm looking at the village manager because I think that is why they're asking for some funding in those two scenarios, because they just there are not enough hours in the day. And if we want to get this done this year, they wanted to get it done last in this year, but that's what happens. The clock runs out. So I think the asks make sense. And the group's great steward also comes to all of the meetings, and Jamie Kane is sort of the staff person that moves things along. And actually, I do want to say for the previous meeting that you guys do get everything now digitally.
Yes.
And you look at Google Map, you put them all up there. There really is no reason for paper, because for you guys, it's actually worked out really well to look at everything digitally. And at the operations center, it's worked out well. So I hope you guys are enjoying it, because you're all volunteers. Got to keep you guys happy. I hope you're all getting out of it what you had hoped to as well.
I think so.
Good. Yeah. We have another person back. I don't know if you want to say anything to add, but okay.
Just here for support.
Look, I think I've said this before. I'm in support. I saw the deck before, and I am in support of where they're heading. It's a really hardworking group, and whenever you have volunteer organizations like this helping the board of trustees move things forward and bring their intelligence and hard work, it's great.
Thank you. Do others have questions and comments from the presentation? I have a few, but usually you guys can check off most of mine by the time it gets to me.
Sure. So I just wanted to say thank you. That presentation was so in-depth and so detailed, and it really shows the work that you guys have been doing. Trustee Levin has actually been doing a great job at updating us. She's actually at those meetings, so it's good to see a full report as well. I just wanted to, as a suggestion, I was really happy to see that in your future plans, you hope to work with the Parks and Recreation Department in addition to planning. I was the project manager, and Rika was the village official liaison to the Downtown Economic Development Fund Council. It's always a tongue twister. And both that committee and the superintendent at that time with our park staff, they did some work as to what the appropriate flowers and plantings are. And what you're doing is more comprehensive, which I think is great, and it's supposed to say because the amount of wells and islands and parks that we have, and now we're doing more plantings where our signs are, and we do a lot of it already. But it's great to have a plan that we could actually go by, that all departments can go by.
Yeah, and that was our plan. It was really just we see that that the other departments are able to do it. We just want something in writing, just so that you have a quick reference. You don't have to sit there and scratch your heads and try to figure it out yourself. Like, at least this way we have something that is easily accessible, it makes sense, no questions, and that if you come in front of us with these plants, there won't be a rejection. And we try to make the whole process easier going forward for everyone.
And I am also in support of all of your asks tonight. The only personal note that I would make is, I did vote on, actually, the majority of us were on the board at that time for a resolution supporting the $15 minimum wage.
Okay.
So personally, professionally, I try to practice what I preach when it comes to that. And so I would just encourage you to consider with your members to just up it for the hourly rate can be in accordance with the symbolic vote that we took. So thank you.
I think
Well,
we
it's
could
a
do that.
stipend, just so the public is clear. Stipends are different than paying people by the hour they work. But yes, it's accurate even the way you had it up. It comes out less than the minimum wage, obviously.
Okay.
Others with comments and questions?
Thank you. I enjoyed the presentation.
Perfect. Ms. Hatter.
thank you for all the work that you guys have done. I guess because it's the environmental, and we do have the HPC, which is historic preservation, and I think those are two very complementary in some different aspects of what the history of what we're trying to preserve within our village. You're asking for $1,000 for preparations and things that you would like to see going forward in a year. So I think my ask will be for the village manager is if it's something that we could ask to the HPC, maybe we can partner with these two groups and try to come up with some information within that, not just be the environmental. So I think it's important for us to show the history that we also have here to for a lot of people that new people that like to come into Austin. My other question is, I guess, more like clarification. And when you say you're doing an inventory for the open spaces, are you talking about just village spaces or just spaces in general?
And for the village, we're
For
specific.
the
Not just village owned.
no, okay, so not just
Privately
village.
owned spaces as well, right?
Well,
Privately owned
that would
spaces?
be that would. I haven't looked at privately owned spaces. Right now, we're looking at right now we're looking at public. It
That includes cemetery. I mean,
Yeah,
cemeteries are also that are
the-
public. It depends.
depends
It
on
doesn't-
who.
It doesn't include vacant lots that are privately owned.
I did look at those. The problem is how open space is defined or not defined.
Okay.
So it's a very vague definition, and we can kind of define it in very broad terms if we want to. It really depends on whose definition you use, whether you use federal, state, or county definitions. So these are things that we are kind of trying to clarify for ourselves as well, as to how far or what technically would count as open space. So a private lot of something that's a very small size, less than an acre, really. I don't really.
But something like Mariondale, which just put dozens of acres into a land trust, would certainly count.
Absolutely.
And the land trust would probably be identified specifically as a land trust, and the rest of their property, I don't know how that needs
That's
to be
how.
accounted for.
That's
Some of
where
that
the
is
tiered
developed, but-
system would come in. Is that we would have that all defined within the parameters for each tier, and we would specifically address all of those concerns as we're going through and identifying which plot would go under which tier and why we would choose it for that. So these are all things that because we have to go through what's village owned, town owned, private, what is an easement, so these will all be taken care of within the next few months, but there is some vagueness within some of it.
You actually brought up another question that I wanted to ask when you said, and nothing against the town, you are asking for us to give you a stipend of $1,500. So when you're looking at these properties, we do represent the village.
Mhm.
So my ask
Town
would
owns
be,
property.
But the issue that comes.
so
Sorry.
are we looking at, so give me an example of a lot of a property of open space. What kind of description are you looking into? And you don't have to, if that's too much details, we can have an offline conversation. That's just for me to know.
Yeah.
But my concern is, yes, the town does have property within the village, but are we doing an inventory for the town or are we doing an inventory for the village?
We are doing an inventory of everything that is within the village boundaries, whether
It's
it's
just Lewis Single Park.
yeah. So whether it's
Which we
town
shouldn't, but that's important
owned,
to understand.
village owned, whoever may own it, we're still including it in the open space inventory because when it comes to nature and open space boundaries and who owns it really doesn't mean anything. So we want to at least make sure that's flagged as something that's open space. Now, whether it's something that's owned by the town or the village, that gets more into to technical aspects of it, but we're just looking more to give a definition for what open space is and at least get it into some sort of a category that's usable, whether it be by us or the village itself. Really, when we do this should be done more in partnership with our surrounding municipalities. It would be more effective that way. But that doesn't mean that we as a village can't move forward and try to do something in the meantime on our own.
I agree with you. So again, to my question before Karen, I'm sorry. So could you give me an example of what is going to be on an open space lot?
There is, I want to say it's either Yale Avenue or Dale Avenue along It's one of the ales. If you go along the Sing Sing Kill, follow it up, go past where the walkway ends, and you keep following it. There's a residential block where the two residential streets, actually the back of the houses, look out over that area. That whole lot, I would flag that as an open space area. It's an area that really can't be developed. It's too steep to put any new buildings on it. It's an area that really isn't going to get cut down and be accessible really to anyone. So that's something that, even though some of it might be privately owned, and that would be like some of the logistics that we would have to deal with going forward, I would identify that as an open space because there's so much greenery, there's so much nature. It's the ecological systems that are there feed into the other systems around Ossining. So that's one place that I would identify. I had the map at home. I meant to bring it, but I forgot.
But I think what you might be hearing, what we might be hearing is once we move forward, let's say a month into this, right? Because the definition will end up defining the project, right? So maybe we'll just, as a committee, you guys, not we, I don't vote, but you guys do, will decide somewhere at some milestone to share with the village manager or with the board or just send something for confirmation that this is sort of the parameters you're looking at. The parameters are going to have to be set up if you want to have somebody work on it anyway at some point, because they're going to have to know what to look at. So we'll just do like an update at some point to make sure we get clarification that they're looking at the right thing, as and some consensus as to what defines the right thing.
Do you want to say something, Karen?
Oh, I just wanted to say the state just came out with a urban forestry grant. The bunch of grants. I don't know if you've seen them yet, but they do. I know. I think the town took advantage of this and did a tree inventory through that grant. So that is something that's available. They're due. The round's due December 4th, so we might have. So we'll follow up and with you, and we're working on some of a different grant through the same program with Parks and Rec. But if you're doing the inventory, this might be something that may have potential benefits.
Great, and actually the town EAC, as you know, they actually did an open space inventory a few years back, and
Maybe that's right. Yeah.
but it was the EAC. It wasn't it wasn't like the staff who did
Right,
it. I don't know if
right,
they got a grant to help do some of the research and the legwork for it, or if it was just
Yeah,
the
I don't know.
volunteers. I know some of the
they got a
volunteers
grant
at the
for a
time
tree
were, so I think.
inventory, so.
Yeah, I think that was an
That's
additional.
more recent.
That was an
Right.
additional project they did a year or two
That
ago.
one's a bit old, right? We got that Stuart. It's like 5 years out or
The
something.
open space inventory in the town.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's out there a few.
Yeah.
Which also didn't mention on the deck, but honestly, for the public, this is not something you do necessarily every year, right? So it's something we do. We update a few years from now.
Do you have other questions?
No, no.
Okay, so I just a couple of thoughts. Then when I was watching it, when we look at whether it's 1,500, I don't, an internship is a stipend, as you said, and the mindset was the $10 an hour. I'm in concurrence with my colleagues that generally when we think about what people are earning and as an hourly wage, we are looking to do $15 an hour. In this case, it's an internship, and they're not going to be logging their hours. But if we have an anticipation of how many hours of work we think it is, and you said 150, then it should be reflective of what that would be. The timeline that we have, to me, that's, unless you have somebody in mind already and you kind of know who's the perfect person for this position, it seems like something that somebody who grew up in Ossining and is now at college might be coming back. So the June deadline, I, unless there's a compelling reason why it couldn't be pushed a little bit, if they show up here in the middle of May, like that we might want to take advantage of a summer internship where we have a really big pool of students who might be coming home from a wonderful school where they're studying environmental planning or something, and they could be a really great candidate for that.
That is our preference. We
Okay.
would prefer if we can get someone who's local, who knows the village of Ossining, who knows how to do this, that we would give preference to.
Right. So we could be reaching out locally to anybody who's
Absolutely. And the deadline is flexible. We just want to make sure that it gets done before before the snowfalls start.
Next year.
Yeah.
Then and whether we're talking about 1,500 or 2,000, like that's not going to really change our 2020 budget. We'll figure that out.
Okay.
I loved the non-invasive native plant listing, and if we're creating a policy, and it sounds like you're already in an incentivizing way or just in an encouraging way talking to developers about this is what we believe is a good policy and a good practice. I don't know if there's some way that we can formalize it either as a policy that this is shared and encouraged for everyone who is doing coming to do any sort of upgrades to their community and doing the education that you're talking about at the local events, whether it's Earth Day or the Village Fair. That's all great, having resources like that online for anybody when they're coming to do permits and looking for things in the community. That's really great information. When you know better, you do better. And I feel like the one thing that we really could formalize is that it's great that the Parks Department has been thoughtful about what plants they might put in when they're doing a particular project. But I mean, we do a lot of plantings, both our Public Works but primarily our Parks Department. I mean, that is something that we could just require. We could set a good example that all municipal plantings will be native non-invasive species going forward. If that hadn't already been the case, we'll formalize it. And I don't know if that's something that people think about when they say what trees we're going to put in this area or not. There's a lot of considerations: how they grow, how much of a mess they make. There's practical considerations, and to talk with our staff, which Karen can do, to make sure that we're doing something that makes sense on all fronts.
Yeah, I'm reasonably sure that the non-invasive.
I'm sure.
is
Yes, we're
covered.
not actively planting bamboo and
So
poison
Yeah.
ivy. I get that, but
native planting gets a little trickier depending on what your purpose is, and
right.
I don't know if our hanging baskets are native plants or just annual. So
God, the baskets are great, but they're not actually in the ground either. So
That
I
is
feel a
true.
little more flexible
Although
on that.
They are in the wells, though. They're
Yeah,
usually-
and we want to try to prevent Japanese knotweed part
It's
two.
the
You
list
know,
of things to prevent. Yeah, and that's also good
I think
education.
it's a
for
good
people.
idea, and I think you guys started talking about it.
yeah, no, I think it's a great idea.
And so then my only last couple of things would be the $1,000 for event planning. We don't need to get deep in the weeds on that. I imagine that's just sort of a round number placeholder. I'd be curious to know, you can get a lot for $1,000 unless you're, if you're just talking about posters, that's not $1,000. But if you're talking, so if you probably have something in mind, that's the sort of thing we don't just say, here's a pot of money, spend it as you wish. You would say, look, these are the things that we're planning for, and then you'd come and it would be, it's the $1,000 is a placeholder for us to have in the budget, so that when you come to us with, we're planning to print up these posters, and
so some
then
sort of
it'll
an
come to the
itemized-
village manager to.
Maybe do like an
You could do
itemized
like a
list
draw
or something, or
you do it, yeah. So we could put a placeholder in the budget, and then as things come up during the year,
Right.
you say, I need $500 for this, and you just draw it down as needed
Right.
based on.
Right.
Okay.
And it could be, you've identified two things. You might decide, hey, we want to go and have a series of workshops with the high school environmental club. And to do that, we want to have, we're going to buy $300 worth of this, this, and this. And that would be great. That's consistent with what you're asking for and what we would want to support. So, and then I just want to, I hope some of you will be with us on December 11th. This was obviously vastly more in depth than what we're asking for all the committees then. The December 11th meeting will be at the library, and we've asked all of the dozen committees we have to do a quick presentation, literally 5 minutes, because if you got a dozen and they each get 5 minutes, that's an hour. A 5-minute version of what you just did.
it can be done.
What you did in 2019, what you're looking ahead to in 2020, and then how can we support you. Now, you've really done a great job at that, so I don't know who from your committee is going to be able to share that publicly on the 11th in a thumbnail manner. But that is something that Rika's really pushed for, and I'm glad that this year we're actually finally following through with our intention to be more deliberate in our thanking of folks like yourselves. The EAC has really been reinvigorated with the new membership to be doing great things to serve the village, and we're just so grateful for it. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're going to take a little 5-minute break and then come back and talk about budget-related items from the board, and the Tom Warren is with us, and then I think we have exec also. Omar's going to be. And for exec. Tom, let us know. You ready? Okay, and we're back in. Manager DeTore, what's up next?
I'm eating milk duds.
Oh, sorry.
Early Halloween celebration for the grown-ups.
So next up, we were going to talk about the Board of Trustees initiatives for the 2020 budget. So to that end, this is sort of, I got all of your feedback. And I apologize, but this is really just sort of notes. But what I did is
Thank you.
put together your requests, and again, this is a little bit rough, but in terms of categories, and what I can do is take you through them and let you know where we're at. So a lot of this is work in progress. Some of it has budget implications, some of it's just things that we're doing as a matter of course, and so priorities have really focused on, there's a lot of commonalities here. So several of you mentioned priorities that are have to do with code enforcement, building inspection code enforcement. So reversing a continued trend of unsafe housing to make sure that we're doing all we can to do regular fire inspections and respond to complaints and again maintain the quality of our housing as best we possibly can. Customer service in all interactions, in really all departments, but as well as those that interface with the public the most, such as building and planning. The online permitting is something that came up that's obviously incorporated into the budget and something that we're working on. And I wrote customer service again, so we're going to really reinforce it. That was part of my notes and sort of consolidating. But so these are some things that we actually have we're actually looking to see if before the end of the year we can do some specific trainings in the area of customer service, but also making sure people know how to be responsive. Sometimes you have somebody who might be coming in and they're upset about any number of things and not taking that personally and making sure you know how to de-escalate a situation and not take things personally, because it seldom is personal. It's usually about issues that person has and maybe some frustrations. So it's really just reassuring them and getting them through the process. So we're working on some of that training, and again, code enforcement. We do have money in the budget to improve capacity for assistant building inspectors and more capacity in that regard. Youth Bureau is something that we've discussed a lot since I've been here this year, and we did dedicate money in the budget. I want to say it's about $146,000 that would accommodate a director for the Youth Bureau, as well as support staff that would probably function as part-time Youth Bureau, part-time recreation. For the Community Center, Recreation Center, we want to continue to enhance the programs that we offer and increase the quality of the programs and the types of programs with a focus on, this is a new term I got, so the person who wrote this will know, toddlers, teens, adults, and seniors. So we really hit across all categories and demographics there. Planning and development came up too, so we have set aside money beyond the comprehensive plan for monies that can be used to fuel other studies and initiatives that would help drive smart growth and planning, as well as economic development, looking into what we can be doing to support the business community, not just downtown, but all the way up Croton Avenue and our continuous business district, as well as ways we can address economic development, parking issues. We do have a CFA grant that will hopefully will get good news on a parking study in December. And we want to look too, as we look forward, how do we want to develop the village-owned lots, particularly those at Market Square and the post office. So again, we've budgeted capacity to go forward in those areas, to really evaluate what we need and to develop a working plan in conjunction with obviously the input from the comprehensive plan, which will be very important to informing that process. Language access is something that came up, and Trustee Herrera had sent a proposal this afternoon about ways that we might be able to accommodate greater language access through all our departments and in our documents, and just make sure that we are responding to the need for, we're basically a dual language community. From an environmental standpoint, we were asked to look at municipal vehicle switch over to electric vehicles. So we don't have a lot of new vehicles in the capital budget for next year. However, we are talking about switching over, particularly for people who don't need, we have village vehicles that really just, drive around town for building inspectors, things like that. So where we can, we are going to start incorporating, trying to take advantage of incentives that are for electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles. So that's something in the works. And as we start to turn over, as cars start getting older and we turn them over, we will be replacing them with as fuel efficient cars as possible. Or maybe no fuel efficiency. Maybe it's all electric. So, and then we also, we've been talking a bit about, and it came up tonight, so training that we need for our various boards as well as staff. So we're looking to incorporate training dollars as well into the budget. So I think that pretty much covers everybody's interest in terms of building capacity for the building department, making sure we offer great services through recreation department, and that we continue to drive efficiency, sustainability, as well as look forward to the future of OSSING through the comprehensive planning process and other ways that we can keep the momentum going. So.
Well, I have to say, it's great to know that I emailed you. I don't think I shared my email with everybody, but the things that I highlighted as my priorities that I wanted to make sure were reflected, you heard them, and they're included here. And I'm also, all the things that are on here that were highlighted by my colleagues also I feel like we all have a similar idea of what should be priorities going forward. So I don't see a lot of crazy outliers. There's not dollar amounts attached to most of them, so that'll be something, I guess, that we'll flesh out during the budget discussions. But are there particular items on here that trustees want to expand upon to make sure that we're all understanding what your intention was and that Karen's understanding what your intention was?
Yes, I would just like to highlight, for me, it was particularly the Youth Bureau. I know for a number of years we have been doing Youth Bureau-like programming with, of course, it would escape me right now, but Beams and the fashion program that we have, and members of this board have been supportive of those initiatives, and I just think that it's time that we take it a little further. As one who has worked for youth bureaus and worked in youth development, it's important stuff, and I firmly believe, and I've always believed that investing in people is the best investment that you can make. So that's the one that I highlighted, and we'll be in conversation because this is great for personnel. I can just tell you guys now I'm going to ask for a little more with respect to programming dollars to make sure that we also have some programming dollars as well, so that things like the Beams and all those other initiatives can sort of be incorporated.
Yeah, and Beams is incorporated in the budget.
Okay.
Right now, so.
Not in this.
Not in this,
the
okay.
136,
No,
but in the.
so there is other programming dollars that can be, even some of the things that the Rex planning
Okay.
separate that we could do. But we'll, as we go through the budget, I think it'll be pretty obvious.
Okay.
They did put in the grant for the Beams program, so if that comes through, we have a match to that.
Okay.
And that would be, Beams would then be incorporated as a program function of a youth bureau.
Okay.
So we're looking for ways to continue to evolve with our youth bureau-like programs,
Gotcha.
but then have them
Housed.
established once,
Absolutely.
once you have a director, and then ideally the director will be charged with fundraising
Absolutely.
to build capacity in that.
Yeah, and actually, this has been a learning process, and there's still, I feel, a lot to learn. We've had a few meetings now about youth
There is a lot
bureaus.
to learn.
But that opens up a whole avenue. It's not just grants, but it's donations that can go through a not-for-profit that is,
Yeah.
and it's job
Absolutely.
development. There's
Absolutely.
a lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot more flexibility there. So the 146,000 might be a salary, but then their job is to
Got you.
blow up the funding.
And I would say, like, if we look at Peekskill, and I would say Peekskill because it's a community similar in size. We, they also have a separate board. So as the board, the board of next year, you might want to look at establishing, boards and
Yeah, I mean, I think that Peekskill and White Plains were two that were highlighted to us
Yeah.
as different,
Yeah.
but very good models to learn from. And I
Absolutely.
think Bill has been reaching out to.
Bill Garrison, our recreation superintendent, has been looking at these programs. So he has spoken to the people in Peekskill as well as, I believe, White Plains, and I can't remember the other community, but he's been in contact with other people who are actually running youth bureaus because there's slight differences in how
Absolutely.
they're structured, what the reporting structure is, where they operate, how they operate. So we're looking at all that to try to figure out. And I think that once we get things approved, then then the work is really looking at how are we, getting into the nitty gritty of how this is going to be established here, what's going to work. And I think there'll be a fair bit of community engagement in that as well, because there's a lot of people in the community who are rooting for a youth bureau.
Absolutely.
We've had some stakeholder meetings about it and a lot of perspectives. So we want to make sure that we go back and regroup with the stakeholders, but also make sure we get everybody on the same page about what this is going to look like as a village program.
Great.
So, I see some of my stuff, and I spoke to you. I don't know, I have not seen an actual presentation on the Youth Bureau, and I actually thought of it something as fitting into the community center when I wrote toddlers, teens, adults, and seniors, because I see it, for me, was fitting into that whole. So different approaches, different, I didn't.
And likely in Ossining, that's where it would.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure, but I do want for the public record that I've actually not seen one presentation on this. Lots of conversations, county level, different. I've been, for my job, involved with it, but I haven't. And because all the meetings are held during the workday, and because I work full-time, I've not been able to attend anything, and they're not videotaped, so I just want to, raise that as an issue for the stakeholders to say that I appreciate all the stakeholders. But the public should understand that, at least for me, I haven't seen actually anything. Although Quantel has spoken to me over the past, 3 years about it. So it's not like I don't know what they are. I'm just saying that there hasn't actually been, it's not even a process. And everybody here is supportive. So that's not really the issue. The issue is to just, it's like a puzzle where all the pieces keep being talked about, but I like it's got to be brought together, and I think that is actually what's going to happen. The
Yes.
budget part is all very interesting, and people could say, should we have them versus something else? And we can have all that going back and forth. And I expressed that to you, and I actually thought of it more inside the community center when I said toddlers, teens, adults, because I think the community center, when I run for office, actually, I have to tell you that there are stakeholders in this community who are really intelligent and really eloquent and know how to ask for things, but there are lots of people, and the lots of people keep talking about the housing issue. And they're not seeing that the unsafe housing is being addressed. So for me, that was an important thing to bring up. Does it have a budget to it? I doubt it. I don't even know where it fits in, but I did want to bring it up as part of our conversation. I don't even know how it's discussed in budgets, because when we do budgets, we discuss budgets, and I know Quantel likes to always say, where you spend the money is where you're putting it. I don't even know how to put that in. So,
First thing on the list.
no, I know that. I didn't say that she didn't hear me. I said,
Because I said the same thing. I think these are
Oh, no.
actually my words that you know,
Oh,
like-
okay,
There-
that might be, but
yeah.
that's something,
Yeah, so-
I also did it, Chase,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
consolidated.
When
probably
it
why
came to
that's so high
housing
on
and
the
code
list.
enforcement, that was a fairly universal thing.
It's just that sometimes when things have numbers, it looks to the public like, oh, they've thought about it and we're done. And things that don't have numbers, conversely, so I just want, if the public is hearing it, that people should know that I'm not sure this is in priority. I'm not sure,
Not
I think that you've
it's-
consolidated our thoughts. And this is sort of a check-in, did you cover? I mean, I really do appreciate, the community center could be a small thing. It could be the biggest thing we're working on for the next decade. It all depends how we define it. So I just wanted my colleagues to hear, but I think that at some point there is agreement that the community center is a place for everyone in this community and with all the changing trends. So I don't have ideas of what we should do, to be honest, which is unlike me. I usually no, but I do appreciate that it's in there. And it
Yeah.
doesn't need to be a bolder bullet. It should be the bullet size and the same as everything else. But I do think that, and public input would be helpful too, to understand it. I just had a question. So you've got studies for these 4 bullets. So this is, we're gonna talk about studies. I'm just, studies for parking. That's the one that sort of caught my, because I thought we were
So-
beyond the studies, that's all I'm saying.
So we did, if you remember during the CFA, we did a strategic planning specific to parking mobility. So again, please take this very generally now,
Yeah.
because when we go through the budget narratives, you will see some of these things specifically represented when we talk about building and code enforcement in the narratives. It will talk specifically to the issues of unsafe housing and everything. So a lot of this will be reflected in the actual narratives. Some of it really is budgeted and things we've been building more capacity to that you've been doing over the last several years. So some of them are more budget direct if it's a new hire, like the director for a youth bureau is obviously an more immediate budget consideration. As far as planning, as we're doing the comprehensive plan, we also talked about there may be needs to, and I think there probably are needs to look at other things, aspects of ensuring that whatever we envision can be actually accomplished, and that it's not just a document that sits somewhere. So some of that may lead to what we're leaving is capacity for looking at making sure not only can we study parking more, but that we can actually implement it. So some of these, I'm saying studies for lack of a better term of what this might look like in terms of a capacity. I think that understanding what's driving the success of Main Street is something that we want to know. Part of that can be organic. It's just really getting out there more and talking to businesses and doing, we talked about things as simple as just having businesses track for a 2-week period, just have people come in and who's ever coming in, just write down their zip code so that we have a better idea of who's patronizing which businesses and where people are coming from. Even that little bit of information is something that we could do pretty easily, and then really dovetailing that with whatever we need to fill in the gaps to give us the steps we need to go forward, so that as we envision the community, we're making sure that we're putting solid building blocks underneath it so that it becomes a reality.
Lastly, I'm hoping you're going to help with this. But we have spent, at least since I've been in office, downtown, waterfront, downtown. We need to invigorate going up what I call Main to 133. Because when I moved here, those businesses looked much better and the downtown did not look good at all. We've done a great job on the downtown. I don't have a solution again. I mean, I have thoughts. I think I put down, up to Mike Risco, I really should have put down the street. I shouldn't be pointing to a business, but the idea was that we need to, whatever we do downtown, we need to find ways to stretch it up. Even something as simple as the, holiday decorations that we're about to put up should be carried through. We need to stretch that out. And yes, I know that it's divided by Route 9, but we need to think, I think, more clearly. I don't want to call it uptown. I remember studying in sociology the meanings of uptown and downtown, and it's not a good meaning. So I don't want to call it, but it's the 133 as it goes up. I look for you guys to, and the staff to figure out how to help us with that.
It's
That it's on here is all I'm saying.
it's an important concern, and it's something that we've been, starting to engage business owners on.
Okay.
So, yes.
Thank you, Rika, because as we talk about parking, it's not on here, but I'm hoping, I see the parking study is on here, but are we looking at
Oh.
installing parking meters?
Yes. Yeah.
that
No,
take-
that's like. That is
What?
that is
Let
one
them
of
in.
mine.
That's an
That's
issue.
one of my
One of
priorities.
you-
These are priorities I got from you. This
Okay.
is
This is just
literally
reflecting
taking your
back
notes
our-
and putting them
our
down.
emails.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
those parking meters, they are on my list, and yes, they are budgeted for.
Okay,
I
because
was really trying to say that. I said,
Okay.
why studies? And
Yeah,
not
yeah,
just
yeah, because
do
I'm
it?
like,
No, but
You know.
I meant,
look,
I
the
guess
parking
Projected
numbers are one
revenues.
thing. But if we wanted to do, if we're looking at, let's just say hypothetically, we're looking to develop Market Square and the post office. You have two surface lots. The parking meter issue isn't going to solve that issue if you develop there. You need to figure out where those, what you need. So there you might need, hopefully we get this grant and we can build on some of the studies that have been done, because there are studies done and we don't want to throw them, we want to use all the information we have. But really looking at then is how do we address what could be perceived as a shortage of parking if we took away those surface lots. And that's really talking about structures and mobility and what we could do at the train station. That's a whole nother conversation. The parking meters is really fixing the issue we have right now more immediately.
Okay, those are two different things
but
then.
also let me say that yes, we may be looking at Market Square lots, but in the meantime, if there's a
with
multi-paying
you on
parking
this.
station, we could be making some money.
I think everybody,
Everybody
is
not gonna
get an argument from
100%
me.
agreement
Okay.
on this.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
we are
You're
all
not gonna-
100%.
You're not going to get an argument from me. That can be done.
No, the parking
Okay, so
studies.
that's a different thing. That's
The
what I was
parking,
trying to
yeah,
get.
no,
Okay.
the parking studies are much bigger picture, long-term planning integrated with
And it's
with
also
transit.
conversations with the DOT,
Yeah.
it's traffic calming, it's looking,
Right.
because we've been, there's even possibilities to create connectivity over Route 9 to kind of correct the physical barrier that 9 presents. Like, there's a lot of things that we can be looking at.
Oh, you didn't write down my idea of how to do that? I missed the thing here.
Oh,
I had
I
a crazy
didn't-
idea. She didn't write it down.
Did I have that in your, I'm sorry, yeah, well, we'll incorporate that in the next round,
A
so.
little crazy. So
And we did find out that the first round of evaluation of our CFA grant applications, we had 3 applications. We got, of the total potential for 20 points, which is awarded by the Regional Economic Development Council, the application related to the Indian Brook Water Treatment Facility, was it just the green roof? Was
The
that the
green roof,
aspect
yeah,
of it?
that was-
Given the full 20 points, which makes it a priority project. But both of our other applications, one of which is this bigger picture, long-term planning, transit-oriented, got 15 out of 20, which makes it regionally significant. So we're going into this with a 95. We don't know if we're going to, how many of the other 80 remaining points we'll get, and we find that out in December, just in time for us to have already passed our budget for the next year. So, I know,
it's okay. We're moving
Whatever.
forward. It's
That's how they
better
do it.
than it was last year. Oh, yeah, sorry. Well,
Oh, sorry, I'm on now. So I had the same thought of Trustee Bazemore, even though I know that there's a lot of possibilities and a lot of people and entities are going to be part of the implementation of the launch of our youth bureau. I still want to see, if possible, when we go into budget discussions, initial programming dollars just to get it started. So once the staff is actually there, what can they do? Or unless we have a model or partners that already have a way to do programming or services without us paying for it. But I just want to have a better understanding as to like how we actually operate the youth bureau with giving the staff no money to use or have yet to actually, and also, and I guess back to
Yeah,
Trustee Levin's point, understanding like the presentation as to what are the startup costs, what are they going to need, space, all that stuff.
So the space and whatnot, I'll just reflect back what we learned from Damia, I can't remember what her last name is, from the county who.
Damia.
Yeah, I mean, her name is Damia, but I don't remember her last name. I
Oh,
was
I
trying to be
forgot
more
too.
formal and professional, but I can't remember her last name. It starts with an H.
who works for the county now, but she was apparently incredibly successful in establishing in Mount Vernon and doing a lot of fundraising there. The way it was presented to us for the startup is you pay the salaries for 1.5 staff, and they go and they get the money for the programs.
Yeah, so that is sort of the startup model that we were told, but that said, we have programs now that we're running that can like sort of be absorbed, that, you know, like, there's some of the programs that we have existing that can evolve into youth bureau oriented, you know, so I think we maybe have that more covered in just the, and we'll talk to Bill too during the budget meetings, but that's, the thought is that's where we're going to. So even with just the programming, you know, we want to make sure we have solid programming for youth no matter what. But some of it, there may be opportunities to augment that.
The other thing is just I'm going to start using TT at, AS, toddlers, teens, adults, and seniors a lot more, because that really does encompass the many groups that use our center. And even though we don't have a formal, physical, separate senior center, we do have a thriving senior program there. In addition to our teens and preteens and all that goes with that in between. But it's I think that's a good way to look at it when it comes to just all programming.
I'll copyright it.
It's pretty good. I like it. The customer service. So that I really appreciate. And this is in no way, you know, demeaning to our staff, but I think any possible way to make our staff better to deal with interactions and you know, dealing with government. It's not an Ossining thing that's unique to us. That most people don't go into their interactions with government in the best positive way. So it's good to have staff that's trained in a way that just can react to it a little better or make it easier or de-escalate if needed. So I just appreciated hearing that. And the last thing, I'm just going to wait till new business of next week, or just when I talk to the mayor about when the appropriate time to really go into language access. But it's something that's very important to me, and I think very important to the village, because, as you said, we are a dual language community. It's not that we're going to be, we have been. And I know that we just want to make sure that our operations, our services, and our programs are able to be reached and understood and accessed by everyone, no matter what your English language proficiency is. So before I head out for the night, I just wanted to read the really short 3 paragraphs just to give people an idea as to what is this language access policy that we keep talking about. Or I just sent this to the board today, this afternoon. It's something that with my colleagues, I hope to, and our manager and our whole team, develop a policy that is doable, but is also comprehensive. I had a great discussion with the mayor earlier, just on how that could look like, and I'm pretty confident that we could move forward together as a team to make it something that could really work in the village. So I'll just read these 3 things, and then I'll just leave it at that. Whereas 47% of Village of Ossining residents do not speak English as their primary language and have limited ability to read, speak, write, or understand English, thereby presenting potential barriers to accessing important government programs or services. And whereas the public safety, health, economic prosperity, and general welfare of Village of Ossining residents is furthered by increasing language access to village departments, programs, services, as well as the Board of Trustees and Police Commissioner operations. And then the last part that I'll just highlight, whereas the Village of Ossining is committed to assuring and providing timely, meaningful access to its programs and services for individuals with limited ability to read, write, speak, or understand English, better known as LEP. So if you see that acronym, that's what it means. In order to reduce any barrier posed to LEP persons, the Village of Ossining will make language access services available at no cost to individuals applying, receiving, or participating in any vital village program, service, or benefit, and of course in a cost-effective and efficient manner. And then the proposal actually goes into what our legislative body will deem is appropriate for us to do. But I just wanted to highlight it because I know that you had put together our list of priorities, and I think it goes hand in hand with the conversation we had earlier. So thanks for linking those. And I guess we could go into the actual pieces of it. I'm not really sure when, or how we should move on to just get feedback on what I submitted this afternoon. But I am confident that we could do it. The reason why I also brought it up today was because there are potential budget implications. So the possibility of having in-person, face-to-face interpreters, and us defining when that's appropriate, when it's not, the cost, and then having a in-depth conversation as to whether we get transcription services for our agencies, or whether we develop our own internal, robust, comprehensive way using our own bilingual staff here in the village currently and investing in them through that way. It's only 2 pages because it's really not rocket science, and I'm happy to say that we already do it in a lot of areas in our department. So this is just creating a policy, making it more comprehensive, and really going out of our way to make sure that our residents understand what's going on and are also able to be independent and thrive on their own as residents, whether you're a homeowner or whether you're any point of interaction that you have with us is in a way that's accessible. Mayor Garrity, I don't know if you want to add more to that. I spoke to you about it, but anything that I missed or that my colleagues want to add, but that's about it for now. But it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, we did. We had a really good conversation, and it's something you've talked about for a long time. So I'm glad that you were able to get the ball rolling with this initial proposal. I think the discussion about exactly what's going to be in the policy and what the parameters are will take some time and discussion, but I do want to be able to account for it in the budget, even if it's just a placeholder way that's somewhat informed, and it could be a very different dollar amount if we are required to pay for transcription services for exhaustive amounts of things or regularly hiring an interpreter. So my first line of questioning would be to talk to Steve Sage in personnel to find out what are the potential avenues for making better use of our bilingual staff members that we have, because we have a number of staff members that I believe in every building, every village facility that are bilingual. And I'm more familiar with the policy we have for the PBA, and it was an issue when we updated their contract last time. It was a really simple thing. We used to cap the number. There's a stipend if you take the test and demonstrate fluency in any language in the police department. And it was capped at X number of officers that were allowed to do it, which was counterintuitive because we want to have as many bilingual or multilingual officers in our department as possible. So we just removed the cap and said anybody who can pass this test and demonstrate a level of fluency is a benefit to us. They can get this stipend, which is like whatever it is, $1,000 or something. And that's just something to encourage multilingual officers to either become certified so that we're aware of all of the languages that are there, or there are some members of the department who recognize have a desire and an interest to become bilingual, and then they can go ahead and become bilingual, and then they're a greater asset and even that much more valuable to our department and to our community. My question that I would ask Steve is, and he can help us understand what the county would require. We're right now doing the PBA contract. I don't know if it's something that would need to be acknowledged in it. Is there an equivalent for that? And then what goes along with it? So if there's somebody who works in the finance office who is bilingual and she goes and takes a test that demonstrates fluency, and somebody in the village manager's office has a form or a policy or something that they want to have transcribed, does she get a stipend for the year, and then with that is an understanding that other departments from time to time are going to ask for her assistance?
We'll talk to Steve. I know for transcription and any type of interpreter service, that's usually somebody who's like got a higher threshold for qualification. Because it's not just being able to speak the language, like you have to really truly be fluent and but so I do think that when you're having documents transcribed, that's especially anything that where you really have to pay attention to context and the exact wording. If you're talking about resolutions and things, that might be a higher threshold. But we'll have to talk to Steve about just ways that we can, I think that again, we have a lot of Spanish speakers in the village. I wish we had more. And I think that ways we can look to make our services more accessible to all people. And then as far as translation, communicating verbally with people is usually the easier level. And then when you get into written documents and things, it becomes a little bit more complicated because you have to make sure. And then you also have to make sure that, you have legal counsel that's checking stuff, so that can get a little bit more complicated. But I think that there's ways we can, there's certainly a lot of communities that are in the same boat. So I think we have to look forward to how other communities are dealing with these issues and keep going forward on it.
In the next couple of weeks, it would be helpful to have some sense of what's an appropriate dollar amount to make sure is included in the budget, so that in 2020, because it is going to take a little time to put forward what is the policy and what's phase 1 and phase 2 and things of that nature, and that's probably not going to get figured out in the next coming few weeks. But if there's a consensus that that's something that in 2020 we want to see really happening, I want to make sure that there's money to be able to make that happen. So I don't know if that's a $3,000 investment or a $100,000 investment, probably somewhere in between.
Yeah, and it's probably closer to if you're really talking about what we currently pay for translation services and stuff, it depends on if you want to go to pretty much everything we do, I think that will get very, very, very expensive. Not to say that we can't do things to start working in that direction, but it's right now translation services. We tend to spend a fair amount on translation. So
You mean the written transcription?
written. So
Okay.
what I learned this week,
Oh,
what I
you-
didn't
you-
know,
yeah.
is interpreters are oral, translations written. So
Okay.
Thank you, Omar.
Okay.
So it's look, it's an important and very worthwhile endeavor. We'll just have to look at what's realistic and what we can accomplish. And again, we're not the only community dealing with this issue. So we'll just go forward and maybe there's other solutions that I'm not aware of right now.
Okay.
Thanks. I'm just gonna go just more overall stuff. Is any grant money out there that we can utilize for any of the items that we have in this list that we can take advantage of it at some point of time? That would be awesome. I know you put a design and development for Market Square in the heart of downtown. So talking about money and budget and things of that nature, we do have a downtown fund. I'm not sure how much money is left on that one, but I'm sure it's.
Six figures still, so I don't know.
So if if we can utilize that money, I think that would be something useful in regards to money that we can spend. Parking in schools, are you talking about probably having some sort of partnership with other municipalities that we can utilize some of their, and it will benefit them at the same time?
So for I'm not necessarily wasn't specific necessarily to parking, but for you've heard me talk about this before. New Rochelle did a study with a agency called WXY that did an analysis of the school district and was able to calculate that they used a lot of different metrics, and it was demographic, it was analysis of how many kids come from certain size buildings. It was, and then it was also analysis of the school needs contrasted to the number of developments coming online, so that as developers were identifying their givebacks to the community, their support of the community, it was really tied very, very specifically to school needs, their capital needs. So one of the things that, if we're looking at the school district, one of the reasons that worked well in New Rochelle is they had a lot of development going on. So there was a lot of potential resources from developers. If we look at Ossining in total of the school district, and we had other municipalities, whether it's a town, and if we talk to our neighbors in Briarcliff and maybe Newcastle, also in the school, if they wanted to participate in that study, we would then put, then it would be a calculation that we could all use, and we'd have a greater economy of scale based on development that could potentially be in the pipeline. So that's where, and then I think for other, there may be, and this is just one example, so I don't want to, there's other ways we can look at it on how we work as a community to address, to really balance our development needs, our economic development needs, our housing needs, our affordable housing needs, and then make sure that we're sensitive about the issues in the school, but we're also creating solutions. So we're not necessarily creating a situation where it's, an either or, do or die thing. So.
Yeah, I just have a question. Design and development of Market Square in the heart of downtown. I don't know who put that, but what was the thought behind, like, what exactly are we talking about under planning?
That was me.
Okay.
We've talked about it for years. We have studies that are sitting around, and when we talk about, when we had the conversation with the state and with the county about the DPW site,
Okay.
and it was proposed that we go out for all the village sites and just see what developers come back with. Some of the concerns that were raised about Market Square and why we didn't do that first is because it would be so incredibly disruptive to the community to start there, because that is such a large existing parking area, which is also tied into the studies for parking. If there's going to be parking structures behind the Crescent and Main Street, so that all the parking that's currently in Market Square would have a place to migrate, so that then there could be consideration of what might ever happen in that area. Because right now, if a developer came and said, we would like to buy that property, and we have a great idea for it, the community hasn't sat down and said, well, we know what we want to decide what it's going to look like, and that should come from the community before it is put out to a developer. And right now, the community hasn't really had. And the last time we did it was when, before you got on the board, you were on the board when we hired the consultants to do, I think they were actually hired in 2012, and then they did the work in 2013, and I think the report was finalized at the beginning of 2014.
That's what the 7-story buildings and the different
and the thing is,
mock-ups.
that was born out of, it was basically reflective of years of study from the comp plan and this and that, and trying to incorporate the basic ideas, and the community saw it, and it was not universally well received, and it died because the approach just wasn't an approach that, it didn't go anywhere. And right now, the economy is in a place where we can be having these conversations. Investors are interested in us, so we should have the conversations so that when the time is right, the community is behind a concept,
And this would be-
has been generated by the community.
And this will be separate than the comprehensive plan. This is how you
It should
envision
be
it.
reflective of the comprehensive plan, but it would be, it's a very specific area that the village owns, just like, yeah. And the DPW, we came up with a concept for it, and in doing that, it was, Market Square was identified as just being too complicated. We can't go there. So let's figure it out so that we can go there. And because right now, it's not the highest and best use, and it could be a lot better for our community.
So part of right now we have Cornell doing a study of the waterfront based partnership with the town and the village, and the presentation, by the way, is posted in the library. Some of the stuff, and they're looking for some feedback. So a couple years back, I reached out to a professor of mine in the architectural school that I went to. Unfortunately, professor passed away shortly right after that, and some of the concept was that try to see a thesis students, either from the master programs that we have at the school that I went to, or some sort of thesis of the 5-year program. They can do some sort of study. So I was thinking, and probably I have the information of the dean of the architectural school. It doesn't have to be the school that I went to. It could be any architectural, any planning school, that I think we should reach out and see if we can get something from the students I mean, I did. I've mentioned this before in the past. So some of my colleagues, my thesis program, it was on the old GE plant in Sleepy Hollow, and that was
GM plant.
GM. Sorry, the GM plant in there, and that was an interesting project at that time.
It's finally happening.
It is. It is. Actually, my thesis was an aquarium, so it was kind of interesting there. But anyway, so I think we should look into partner with someone or with a school or some sort of, just like Cornell, that I think will be helpful for us to utilize some of their, the studies that they can bring to us. It won't cost us anything. It will be their cost, and it will be something that we can utilize in the future, and based on what we actually trying to accomplish and all these things that we have talked about now. So everything else, I think you have covered. We talked about, obviously you and I had other conversations in regards to housing and safe housing, and we talked about how do we approach that, and I think we've been talking about in the budget process. And okay.
Issue of, the opportunity to work with graduate students came up at NICOM, as, a lot of municipalities do that to take advantage of great talent, emerging talent, so.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Speaking of budgets,
And next up, we have,
Tom, we could have put you before. I didn't think about it. You're usually so patient and willing to stay, but we love having you here. I'm sorry if we.
I would have stayed anyway because these are things that you're talking about that.
he has to incorporate into the budget.
Exactly.
That he's just finding out about now, so.
So we'll see you next week.
Yeah, when the budget's due.
Yes, exactly.
So we'll be, well, most of them he knew about, not everything. There were some
Well,
new,
all
there
the
were some
coffee
new
you
ones,
want.
and there were some ones I don't think you were here for yet, so. But, Tom Warren, our village treasurer, is here to talk about the village clerk fee schedule for 2020.
Right, so we've been in a meeting with the department heads talking about their budget requests, their narratives, their capital needs, and also the fee schedules. And when we met with the village clerk, Marianne reminded us that if there's any fee changes that pertain to any of the license applications that she sends out at about this time of year, as well as the applications for the train station parking, she'd like to know if any changes are going to be made so that she can make sure that she includes those in her application forms. So I did address those items
Already.
on the memo. We did go through each of them, and we reviewed, when the last time the fee had been changed.
When does Marianne need all that stuff? It seems
She'd like to send out her mailing this week.
so we're being given no notice, basically.
Well, we were hoping to have this meeting last week, the work session. Things got delayed.
Well, I mean, she mentioned this to me, and just to for anybody watching at this hour, usually if she has recommendations for fees that have been sort of languishing and not being updated, then that would be a recommendation, and maybe that. But when I asked her, she said she's not recommending any.
Right,
Because we have
exactly.
been doing increases on a lot of these in recent years.
She didn't recommend any fees, and we discussed it with her. As I had said before, we reviewed the history of the fees. Things like the train station parking is usually increased every third year. This would be the third year in 2020, so there's no recommendation for an increase to the train station commuter parking fees. And we also did a survey of surrounding communities, and the fees are still competitive. And the alarm user permits and the amusement devices fees were last increased in 2018. We also discussed the cabaret license, that there's no recommendation for a fee increase for 2020. Currently, the fee is $500. That was established in 2012. But in 2016, the board did include a provision for a half-year fee. And some of these other, revenues are relatively small in terms of dollars. On the taxi license fees, I believe that there's a lot of individual companies and maybe individual drivers as well. It seems that the board's policy has been to keep those fees relatively flat, which is also in recognition of the fact that the taxi fares for the residents and users haven't been increased in a number of years. So the bottom line was that there were no recommendations for fee increases for 2020, but if there was a desire by the board to increase some of these fees, we do need to consider them.
In some cases where the mailings are going out or they have to be done in advance of the new
I'm not
year.
sure that the forms have been printed. I think that they were waiting to find out like what the sense was from the discussion tonight before they actually start printing the documents.
I'm fine with holding to our intention of increasing the commuter parking for the train every third year. If we aren't at that point in the cycle, then I'm not feel a need to push it, because we did do a lot of research and thought about that when we established that pattern in 2018. It looks like we did a lot in 2018. And cabaret license, we did more than just create a half-year permit. We created, oh no, that wasn't, was the cabaret? Yeah, we created a whole tiered system that didn't exist, and we changed the whole the code and the policy to go along with it. I think it was a legislative change, at least a code. The only one that kind of stands out, but it's such a messy one, and we talk about it all the time, is the taxis.
Yeah, 'cause that's.
And it's so messy, and transportation is changing so much. Like I couldn't possibly figure that out tonight.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that because, like, we're still at $5. So I actually take cabs and Ubers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that typically cab drivers get like, half the fare.
Mm.
So it's like, most people get $5, so they get to keep like $2.50. And so I know like when the fares go up, like ideally, hopefully, what the driver gets also goes up. Then there's the whole idea like when you get an Uber, typically you're spending $7. So as Uber starts to take over, then it's just an interesting thing. I don't know. I mean, and we also have a lot of cabs here in Austin. Like I think how many cab companies do we have? Like 50?
110.
Yeah.
110 drivers.
Yet when I call one, I can't get one. It's
100
amazing.
I don't know the drivers.
It's really
Drivers,
amazing.
110 and it's about 60 cars, something along those.
60 cars.
So can I just
Please,
interact here a little bit? So, couple months back, Rika and I sort of asked the chief to have some sort of a meeting with the taxi drivers because of the nature of different complaints of our community members. And we had a meeting this past yesterday, the courthouse, and I was part of that.
Not me. When you said Rika and you, but
Yeah, no,
we
sorry.
does
Yeah,
not
we-
include me.
Yeah, sorry. So we had a request that I was notified that they were having a meeting. I was part of the meeting. Part of the some of the discussions that that happened yesterday in here is they wanted, and I guess we can formalize this, and I'll talk to the chief and talk to Lieutenant and Sergeant and see how they want to bring up how they want to bring this into sort of probably like an internal meeting first, and then probably a work session, because some of the stuff has to obviously change with regards to the fees, because 3 years ago, we talked about fees, and one of the meetings that I was part of it with the taxi drivers as well, and trying to change some of the policies, what are we doing in here? But anyway, they are trying to put, they would like the taxi drivers to incorporate a camera into their vehicles. And there's front and back cameras with audio. They have the specs of this camera system that they would like to utilize, and they would like to modify the inspection time of the year, and that obviously that could be reflected of some of the fees, some of the fares. So that's something that it hasn't really been formally brought up to the board, and I don't know how that will be reflected to that. Obviously, again, that could change some of the fee schedules that we have right now. So,
Is there a reason that they want camera and audio?
yes, that will help them solve a lot of the issues. Different complaints, I guess, that happened. I didn't know anything about it. That happened, either you
With
the
the passenger
passengers
or with
with the
the-
passenger against the driver, or from the driver to the passenger, in two different occasions from what they were informing me with the two major crimes that happened here in Austin not too long ago. One of the suspects actually got into a taxi cab, and if they had a camera, they would have been able to solve some of the issues a lot faster. The other one that happened in Broad Avenue, by some of the cameras that they have outside the buildings, they noticed that there was a taxi driver passing by. If they had a camera within the car, it would have been able to help them some of the issues. So they would like to, again, I don't want it, there's a conversation right now, there's the stages, we haven't formalized anything, they're aware. Obviously, there was other topics that I raised yesterday in regards to the speed and how did they work, and obviously there was some complaints from their end about people driving taxis that were not really taxis, they were not really Ubers, they just literally people driving their own vehicles. So that was something that happened yesterday. I still need to sit down with them and try to figure out what would be the best way, obviously with staff and some of the
I
board
think you
members.
just reinforced the point that we can't figure this
So-
out tonight.
No, we cannot figure that
being,
out.
That being said, if there is somewhat a consensus on the board, I do think that it's something that, particularly for the taxi cabs, that may be something that we actually take time discussing this particular budget season. And I would actually really want to understand, and I don't know if Mary Ann can do it, but what are some of the neighboring
And if I
cab
may,
fees
if I
within
may,
themselves?
and
'Cause I
that's
know on
something,
Peekskill, it's like $6.
and I asked the same question. Just keep in mind that it's a little more complex on that conversation because the town also their fee is based on our fees. And we have the
Yeah, they have
senior
the senior
vouchers.
vouchers, yeah,
So
that always-
whereas it's not just, we can do this now, is more like a conversation that I think we should have also with the town, in regards to their type of program that they have.
We
So-
can vote on fees anytime, right?
Correct, and that's something that, that I have mentioned to them, is like, look, we can figure this out. We need to get this, figure it out, and in our end, what happens, and we can modify the fees at any time of the
I
year.
would like to have that
Mailing
conversation
out the
this year.
applications, though, based on these fees.
I'm sorry?
You actually use that.
For these, and correct me if I'm wrong, the
know
clerk
that there will
needs to
be
mail out the fees for the applications for
fine.
these fees.
I think the only one that I think we should have, that we should consider, and it's a complicated consideration with a lot of moving parts, and it sounds like we need to hear from the clerk, we need to hear from the police chief, but is taxis, and the fees can be changed at any time
And
during
overnight
the year.
parking.
Well, wasn't overnight parking just done in 2018 and
I
on
thought
a
it was
3-year
70,
cycle?
and I think there was a resolution,
We
right?
weren't
No,
going to
that's
bring
fine.
up overnight parking because that's
Oh, we just
something.
increased it by 50%.
We have that in here. So-
Parking,
On-street hardship?
the overnight parking hardship, it went up, I think, $5 last year.
Before that, didn't it go from 50 to 75?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so.
But
let's-
we weren't going to discuss that tonight because that can be, discussed during November when we're reviewing the fee schedules. We were trying to,
They have to, they're annual permitting, so they have to go out essentially.
Oh, and
now.
taxis are annually permitted?
Yeah, so I don't, if you may be able to change the fees, but if you're issuing the permits annually, then it won't take effect.
Well, yeah.
But I don't know that realistically you can do this before the end of the year.
So it's $3.25 per driver, or per cab company. Is it per owner? Like owner as like so like mommies and Equa pay the same, like $3.25 flat?
Or if you know, Equitaxi has 30 cabs
Yeah.
and Mommy's
Yeah.
has 4, then
Right.
Because
That's
yeah.
what he's
that's a
saying.
different rate.
I thought the owner paid the $325 regardless of how many cars they had, but then there would be the individual
The individual license.
There's two,
license
right?
for
There are
the
two fees.
driver.
The owner fee is $325. That's the one-time fee. But then for every taxi driver's
Every driver is
license,
145.
every individual taxi cab driver within that company, it's $145.
The last page.
And then the replacement fees and transfer of medallion and things like that. So the bigger you are, the more you pay, but you're not paying.
It's interesting that we say transfer medallion because there's not a medallion. There's a taxi cab owner license for $325, and that's like one individual or one entity, and then they might have one car or they might have 30 cars. But the only additional fee that they pay is for the number of drivers that they have on their staff who might be making use of that, of their vehicles. Right? Is that what I'm understanding?
But but the taxi cab driver's license, the 145, is paid by the individual driver, correct? Not necessarily the cab company.
Right, so what you're suggesting is, yeah, and look, that hasn't increased since 2014, and that's
2014.
okay. I mean, I think
Yeah, the taxi
you're being a
cab
little bit more sensitive to the individual,
Yeah.
not trying to overburden that
Absolutely.
individual, but the taxi cab license owner at 325 hasn't increased since 2015. And maybe that's an area where we really we shouldn't let it go for 4 or 5 years
That's fine.
anyway.
That-
Cab companies we at?
A lot.
Right, so supposedly there's a lot of very small cab companies, like with maybe 1 or 2 cars, so like each company would be paying the $325, so presumably those revenues have increased in total dollars.
Yeah, it's not so much about increasing revenues, but like, it just good practices we've learned that when you do not increase fees for 5 years in a row, then you do things like you increase it by 50%, like, and that's ridiculous. So we should be increasing it by, $25 this year, and maybe next year by another 25 or something, or what do you want? What do you want to
So
bring it up to?
so you're talking about
I
right now
mean-
the owners, sure?
Yes, I'm talking. I'm the,
Yeah, just the
Okay.
the
So it's the
325 of the
325.
taxi
yes.
cab
I mean,
owner
so when
fee.
do you need So she needs to know this today.
It's a little bit of the problem.
Well, it's.
Or
But I think the application for the other licenses are all on one form, whereas I think the taxi is probably a form by itself, so maybe that could be on a little bit different time schedule.
Well, how much more information do you need to make a decision?
talking
about
about
it?
And also, can you explain to me in the notes, it says 2015 fees, 325, 145, 25, 25, 100. Oh, that's just this.
Right,
That's
those are,
just this,
those are
okay.
crib notes as to the history of the
Okay,
fees.
okay. So what that's telling us is in 2015, they increased the, everything. They increased the license,
The
the
taxi,
individual license fee by $10, as well as the taxi cab owner fee. They actually didn't increase the owner fee since 2014. It didn't increase in 2015, so it's already been 5 years.
Yeah, they should be increased. I'm not sure why the recommendation is not to increase. So the verbiage on the cover letter talks about how we're this, and that, and then you read the detail, and in fact, it doesn't match the cover letter. It isn't true that, in this case, it's been a number of years. It is not true that in our commuter rates, that we are the same as everybody else. In fact, the majority are more expensive than us and have increased. So when I read the cover letter, I was all okay. And then I looked at the detail, and it doesn't actually work. And so you then end up having to look at more and more detail. The taxi, what is it that you need
Stuart,
on the taxis?
quick question: would the law have to be changed if we said, "Hey, it's 325, flat rate, and then per additional car a fee"? Would the law have to be changed?
Yes. Sorry. Yes, you'd have to change that, because right now you're per owner.
Gotcha.
So if you're going to do it per vehicle that the owner has, you would have to change that.
Yeah.
Why can't you increase the owner but not the per vehicle?
We can.
We can.
but-
I mean, we
Order
can.
we can, but then it won't be. To me, it's like if you have, like Victoria was
Yeah.
saying, if I own 10 cars, and he owns 1 car, I'm still paying $325.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is that fair for him?
Because he's not paying for the.
That's how it's
per
been
tra-
all this time. Yeah,
Right.
okay.
I understand that, so. I think
And
that's-
do all the taxis come exactly at this time of the year? It's one
Yes.
fell swoop?
Yes.
So this is,
There's an annual.
so it's
they
not
Generally
their, it's
spend
not
it-
their annual. All taxis in Austining next
They
month are
generally
getting.
spend a weekend with the clerk and one of the sergeants, and that's what they do.
What do they do?
The weekend is when they do all the applications.
Got
at
it.
the end
But
of the
so
year.
everybody gets it one time for the
Right.
year. It's not an annual like March that
staggered.
comes,
No,
okay.
no.
So it's now or never. And changing the law.
So what we should do is, is
24 hours.
change the law so that, which we can't, is change the law so that the company that has 20 cars is paying more than
Well,
the company
we
that has
can,
Or
but
we
just
can-
not
But
for this year.
not for January 1st.
Or we can at least say 350, just to,
Yeah, just to keep.
Well, we should raise it
yeah,
anyway.
we should raise it.
The owner part.
Yes.
So then the one recommended change we have is the taxi cab license owner fee to increase from $325 to $350. We'll start there, and now we understand we need to change the law so that it can be more proportionate.
To size.
When we look at the change of law, we'll look into increase of the rates
Yeah.
as well to do. Sorry, thank you, Tom. When we look at this, we'll look at also, when we change the law, we'll look into change the rates as well for how much.
And
the
that, yeah, and
fares,
that requires
the
a
fares.
conversation with
Correct.
the town and everything.
That's a whole
else.
conversation.
Definitely not figuring that out tonight.
No, no.
Okay.
I'll have a
right.
resolution for next week with regard to that one fee.
Okay.
The law change is something we can.
Right.
And
That's a-
Correct.
do
that's
we
a-
have fines when consumers complain about taxi companies? What happens? I don't
They
understand.
generally go to the chief.
Correct.
Okay.
And the chief attempts to deal with those. My understanding is any of those complaints are heard by go directly to the chief.
Okay. Are there any fines associated with any of those activities?
We have no fines. They can have their license lifted, and there are provisions in our code to do that, but there's no fine structure.
Okay, I'm just asking a question. I just don't know.
There's no fine structure.
Okay.
I have just a quick question. Do we have a requirement as far as the year that a car has to be like? It can't be like, it has to be, no.
That it
Uber-
has- that
like,
it has 4
like it has
tires
to- no,
on
like
it?
it has to be
Oh,
like,
okay.
it can't
Has
be like more
inspection.
than 10 years old.
I don't know
or-
if we do have an inspection requirement.
So they do. have
That's
to-
in our code, but I don't think we have something that it's got to be a particular, after a particular model year, but it is inspected. That is an annual inspection for the cab.
The car has to pass the inspection.
Yeah.
Like every other vehicle. on
You know,
the
like
road.
Uber, it's like, you know, it can't be more than 10, well, they might be getting a little loosey on that, but it used to be like, can't be more than like 10 years old or something like that. I don't know.
Well, but in all fairness, with Uber and Lyft, you could actually order based on the quality of the car too. I mean, they've got just a different model.
Okay, so,
All right, so what are we changing? One thing?
just the
350.
owner license fee is going from $325 to $350. Stuart's gonna have a resolution ready for us for next week, and we will let Mary Ann know to anticipate that.
Speaking of fees, village manager, what's with the dog? Where's the money?
Oh.
I mean, I'm speaking in shorthand for those that are following.
Yeah, we will have that resolved. We're working on resolving that, so it just, we were communicating with the town about that, so it will all,
You want to touch the check?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of steps that are supposed to fall into place on both sides, and right now, nothing's moved forward.
well, we've communicated those steps, so I think that we wanted, the town requested a meeting to go through the steps, so we'll,
Didn't we give them everything they asked for?
you know, there's a lot of moving parts, so we'll just go through the steps.
All right, well, you can update me at some point on what that is, because I was reluctant to agree to some of it to begin with, so if they're asking for more, I'd like to know what it is.
Well, until those are resolved, I'm not giving you a resolution to
Right.
take it away. So until that changes, the village would continue to get revenue for dog licenses.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
Just thought I'd
I think Jamie set up a meeting. I have to double check. In fact, I'll text her.
We don't have to text her at 10:40 at night, that's okay, we can talk about it.
Well, I text
It's
myself
easy.
to remember to text
Oh,
her.
understood.
Also easier to just when you remember it, you know that.
Well, it's
She doesn't have
sometimes
to read it.
stressful for the person, yeah, but,
I heard an answer.
Okay.
Alrighty, so, Are we doing executive session not for collective bargaining, or I'm so tired, can we just talk about it tomorrow?
Fine.
All right, so is there a need for executive session? Okay. Is there anything else on the agenda or not on the agenda that we needed to cover? No. Okay. We have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed this very special fifth Wednesday work session here for the Village Board of Trustees. Next week, we will be at the Birdsall Fagan.
No, community center.
Oh, thank you, the community center. Oh my gosh, it's such a big one. The manager is going to present her first proposed budget ever as the village manager, and she's going to let us all know in human terms what all those line items mean. We're very excited for that. We also have 2 public hearings. One for the honorary naming and one for the modification of the charter for the assistant village manager position. And then all the other good stuff that'll inevitably be on there.
Yes.
Yes.
And what time does it start?
It's still 7:30. 7:30 at the community center.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Dude, you are on camera. We are still having a meeting. Trick or treat. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.